All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 60 of the Sports Hour Plus with Miller and Watson, featuring my boy Daniel Booth, Danny B. Oh my goodness, back live and in person. I haven't seen this man in 6 years now. So in person. So we are
Somewhere in
back
there,
together,
probably.
But Snubs and Rematches. He's in for Morgan. Morgan, for those of you that are like, where's Morgan? She is in Florida right now. Or might be on her way back to the East Coast. Her and her dance team are obviously dancing in nationals in Florida, which she talked about last week. So obviously she won't be here. She'll be here later on the following week. But Danny, this is why we have good friends. Danny's here in substitution for her. So what's up, Danny B? How you doing, man?
You know what? Life is crazy, man. And I'll tell you, we picked we've been talking about this for a little bit about me jumping on here. And I think with everything going on, which will lead into the Super Bowl, we'll talk about that. And then obviously everything going on with the big blockbuster trade that happened. We picked a heck of a time to have me on, I'll be honest, because there's a lot of stuff that is going on in the sports world. But yeah, man, life is crazy. Once again, I recently moved to Connecticut. For those who don't know me, my name is Dan Booth, and I'm a local sports reporter and anchor for the local CBS station in Hartford, Connecticut. So I've been bouncing around like crazy. I went to Syracuse, went to the Newhouse Masters Broadcast and Digital Journalism program with Kylan, and then after that, I went to Abilene, Texas for 2.5 years. Covered a lot of high school football. I was in Dallas Cowboy country, which obviously is a interesting place to be for both of us. Yes, me growing up a Giants fan, so did stuff there. And then after that, I was the weekend sports anchor there. And then I moved over to Augusta, Georgia, where I was the sports director for the CBS and NBC stations there for 2 years. And I covered the Masters. I covered the University of Georgia, the Georgia Bulldogs for football specifically. I covered the national championship when they beat TCU. I covered the University of South Carolina as well because both are within close distance. And I was there for 2 years. And then about 6 months ago, I moved back up to the Northeast, and I am in Connecticut right now. So it's a wild journey. And obviously, being back closer to home is a big deal for me. I know, Kyle, I know it's something that matters to you a lot as well. So it's good to reconnect, and I appreciate you for having me on because I'm excited to dive into some of these. These are some topics, man. Let me tell you.
Hey man, I like to pick them, man. I like to pick them. But yeah, so if you want to follow us on X/Twitter, Morgan is at M_India_Miller. I am at Kylan W. Watson. Danny B is at Dan Booth TV. Definitely check him out. Give him a follow if you want that UConn update. So we got so y'all know I don't discriminate now. I've got friends that represent most NFC East teams. Morgan's a Giants fan. He's a Giants fan. I promise you, I don't plan it this way, but it just works out that there's a Giants fan somewhere on this show, no matter what. So if I could just have a totally Eagles fan show, I would, but it works out that this always happens. So, somehow, some way, the Giants are always represented somehow, some way. It just works out that way. So Danny's here, which is great to see. I'm glad to have him back on the East Coast. And it is what it is, man. We're glad. Shout out to Syracuse for bringing us together as well. But our prayers and thoughts continue to be with all of the people who lost their lives and their family members in the plane crashes in Washington, D.C. and Northeast Philadelphia. Very, very tragic event. For any ice skaters or stuff who watched the show and unfortunately lost their family members, whether they be soldiers. The thing in Northeast Philly was unfortunately mostly Mexican nationals and one person on the ground that we know of. So, prayers and all that to you guys. And we hope that this show can provide a distraction. I know it's kind of tragic to lose family members. We've all done it. So if we can provide some little distraction for you guys, a little some relief, some comedy, and some sports, we're glad to do that. But yeah, so very unfortunate happenings this week with 2 plane crashes. So yeah, we're sending prayers and thoughts your way. And now a hard turn there. Unfortunately, to the biggest news or the biggest trick, depending on what happened to you, what you were thinking this week. I woke up to Danny texted me about how crazy of a trade. I had no idea we was talking about until I checked X this morning. My friend also was like, "Wake up, Colin. Luka Doncic has been traded," and I was like, "What the heck is going on here?" So I checked X, and my mouth was down here because I was like, "This has to be a joke." Shams has to have been hacked, but it turns out to be true. Luka Doncic, and for those of you that have been living under a rock, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Maybe you're like midway through watching this show and watching the Grammys. Luka Doncic, you read this headline right. Luka Doncic was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers for Anthony Davis and basically to be respectful to Maxi Kleber, Markieff Morris, and some Texas ribs. That's basically what happened here. And you know, my reaction, because Danny didn't share this, but Danny's a big Mavericks fan. But for those of you who have been watching this show long enough since its inception, during a broadcast reel that we did in Stamford, Connecticut at the NBC Sports Studios, I have been telling people, Danny knows this. I told him since 2019 that Luka Doncic was not long for Dallas. Now he laughed at me. So did Morgan. Everybody was saying it was Joel Embiid, but I kept telling people it's Luka Doncic and then it's Giannis Antetokounmpo that'll end up being traded and will leave their medium-sized markets for somewhere else to win championships. Now, of course, I thought that Luka Doncic would do way more, and obviously I didn't think this would happen at 25 years old. I probably had it more pegged at 30 plus, when he's at the tail end of his prime. But then I didn't count on Nico Harrison being stupid. So I think this is a shocking trade. I think this is a big dub for all of us who have casual basketball fans, or big trade machine people who always have the dumb 2K trades that only happen in 2K. Now those people will be like, see, my dumb trade isn't as stupid as I thought, thanks to Nico Harrison. So, thank you, Nico, for all of your wisdom for making these stupid people think that Danny and I are crazy when we tell them these trades aren't likely to happen, because all it takes, as I said off here, is one stupid GM. And so I think Rob Pelinka was just like, are you serious? Okay, before he changed his mind. So, I think this is a crazy trade. I'll get into it more with the next question with more details. I think this is a crazy trade. It's crazy for Dallas. I know they thought that they at least had one organized franchise, but apparently not. So I don't, I do love kicking Dallas while they're down, but in this case, because I do somewhat like the Mavericks more than I like the football team, I'll be objective here and just say that this is a crazy trade. I can't believe that this happened. I know Luka Doncic can't believe that it happened either. Anthony Davis can't believe it was happening, because apparently he was having a CM Punk rant in the Lakers locker room when Joel Embiid tried to call him about it. So, I'm of the mindset that this is crazy, and, walk on eggshells if you're, not a superstar who knows that they can't be traded until later on, until next season or later. But yeah, walk on eggshells if you're a superstar who is, I don't know, I guess beefing with the front office. I mean, I don't know what happened here, but I just say all it takes is one stupid GM. Danny?
And to me, so strap yourselves in, everybody, because we're going to be here for a minute, because there are a lot of layers to why this is, like a lot of people are saying, the most shocking trade in the history of the NBA, because there's a lot of things that go into it. So first and foremost, Kylan mentioned a little while ago, I did grow up a Mavs fan, despite being from New York and growing up just outside the city. When I was really young, in like 2002, the first team that I ever really saw on TV was the Dallas Mavericks. It wasn't the Knicks, it wasn't the Nets. And I really started loving the Mavs when they had Dirk still, they had Steve Nash. My favorite player was Michael Finley, because Michael Finley was a guy who did a little bit of everything, right? He got the 25-5 consistently. He had games where he would erupt and get 30, and he was just so much fun to watch because he was great at every part of the game. Michael Finley, and the reason why I'm going into this, is a very important person higher up in the decision-making for the Dallas Mavericks. There was actually a little clip going into the NBA Finals last year, where after the Mavs won the West, where Luka had a beer in his hand, and Michael Finley notoriously took that beer from him and then looked at him funny. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because part of the reason why the Mavs, according to sources and what's been said, why they decided to trade Luka, which you don't trade players like Luka, but the reason that they did, in part, was because they were not confident in Luka's ability to stay in shape and be serious about his body from a day-to-day level from that standpoint. That doubt led them to have fear about giving him that super max contract that everyone's been talking about, to be able for him to sign that and be with the Mavs for the X number of years moving forward. And the reason why that's complicated is because by trading him to the Lakers, Luka is no longer eligible for a max contract. The reason the max contracts, the super maxes, are a thing in the NBA is because the NBA wanted stars to stay with the franchises that drafted them. They wanted there is a drastic increase in pay with the supermax contracts to incentivize those players to stay where they were drafted and to build something and be a part of it, as opposed to jumping back and forth like a lot of superstars do in the NBA now anyway, in most sports leagues, honestly. But and there's so much that goes into this, but the big thing for me is you don't trade Luka, because players like Luka do not get traded. This is the first time, according to what Shams said from ESPN, that 2 all-NBA players were traded for each other in the same trade during the season, which, once again, makes sense, because if you have a person who is a big part of your franchise, why would you trade them in the middle of the season when you're on a playoff run? And the big thing for me with this is, one, Luka just led the Mavs to the finals. So something that came out of the Mavs organization was that they were prioritizing defense and they wanted to make this trade because they felt like it was a win-now move. Luka just led the Mavs to the finals, and they ran into a buzzsaw because the Celtics are the best team in the NBA, and they still are until someone proves them otherwise, because of how much depth they have and everything else they have on the perimeter and the star power and yada, yada, yada. But in reality, you don't trade players like Luka because Luka is hard to find. Everybody knew that Luka, coming over from overseas, he was called the Magic Johnson of Europe before he came over here. That's his play style, but he's a much better shooter, and everyone compares him to LeBron and just how great of a player he is, averaging 28, 9, and 9. And you can't replace a guy like that. You just can't. Not to mention that in the trade, you got Anthony Davis. And Kylan, you and I have had several conversations about Anthony Davis versus Joel Embiid in the past. And it's funny how this is kind of, gone because there's more, subject matter to talk about in that department. But Luka turns 26 in a month or so. You traded a 25-year-old superstar for a guy who is a future Hall of Famer, an NBA champion, one of the best big men in the league, has been for a long time, national champion in college at Kentucky, the whole deal. Anthony Davis is the real deal. The last game that he played for the Lakers before having his abdominal strain was a 40-20 game. So it's not like Anthony Davis can't play. The problem is that Anthony Davis has a massive injury history, and that he is also deeper into his prime. And Luka hasn't even hit his prime yet, which is scary to say, considering that Luka is probably the second best player in the NBA when he's healthy. And when push comes to shove, for me, if you're going to trade someone like Luka, a player of that caliber, you need to have, I had a conversation earlier with someone, you need to have the Jimmy Johnson, Dallas Cowboys, 1980s Herschel Walker type trade, where you get the farm, you get everything. You get draft picks, you get players, you get assets that can help you build for the future and build a dynasty, which is exactly what the Cowboys did in the late 80s into the early 90s. The Mavs did not do that. They only got 1 first-round draft pick, along with Anthony Davis and Christie as well, who is a decent player, but still. Anthony Davis is going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. But what happens with the Mavs in 2 or 3 years? If you would have told me right now that Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson would be on the same team, if you told me that 5 years ago, I would have said that that team is going to go win the finals because all 3 of those players are Hall of Famers. I wouldn't say that now. You can make an argument that the Mavs probably have the second best starting 5 in the West right now when you add Anthony Davis into that, and we'll get into what the future of the teams look like in a minute. But the fact that the Mavs only got 1 first-round draft pick in return, and the sad part about that first-rounder, you want to know what really sucks about that? It's in 2029, and if it means nothing, and let me tell you why it means nothing. Because if the Lakers are not championship relevant with Luka Doncic on their roster in 2029, then something horrible went wrong in LA. Because once again, he's 25 years old. Luka Doncic is going to be one of the best players in the NBA still, maybe the best player in the NBA by 2029. And by making it so he can no longer have a max contract, a super max, losing out on over $100 million this offseason, which is, so now you're talking about uprooting a guy's life, throwing him away from the franchise that drafted him, and impacting his pocketbook because now he will be able to not be able to make $100 million. He'll make $100 million less than what he should be making next year, according to the way the contract structure is built. And that draft pick means nothing because the Lakers are going to be competing for championships then. So that's going to be a late first round pick. So, and when you think about that, and I'll throw it back to you, Kai, in a sec, it's when push comes to shove, I want you to think about this and something that hit home for a lot of people that I know that are Nets and Knicks fans. The New York Knicks traded five first round draft picks for Mikal Bridges, who is a very good player and could be a very good piece to a championship winning team. He is not an all-star and he's never been named an all-star. And the Knicks had to send 5 first rounders to the Nets to get it. Luka Doncic easily, and compared to what we saw in the Paul George trades, in the Russell Westbrook trades from OKC, from the Kawhi Leonard trades, easily should have been 5, 7, 8 first-round draft picks. Some team needed to mortgage their future to get Luka Doncic away from the Mavs because that's how good he is and that's how young he is. It doesn't make sense from a value standpoint, and that's the saddest part because the Mavs don't have a lot of draft picks between now and 2030 because they traded a lot. So now you're banking on Kyrie, AD, and Clay to lead the Mavs to a championship in that time period. And even then, right? So let's say best case scenario happens and the Mavs go on and they win the finals. They beat OKC, who they have played really well against so far this year, honestly, despite OKC being a phenomenal team and the best team in the West. When push comes to shove, even if they win the championship, right, and they get the Mavs' second championship in franchise history, is it worth not having Luka Doncic on your team for the next 10, 12, 13 years? That's a serious question that needs to be asked that I don't think a lot of people are asking because players like Luka don't leave. They don't. Like, it's funny. I was, once again, Kai, and I'm curious to get your take on this too. Someone said to me earlier that this trade would be like in 2007, after the Cavs lost in the finals and got swept by the Spurs when LeBron dragged that bag of bums to the finals, other than Big Z. Shout out to Big Z. You imagine the Cavs being like, we got swept. That's a bad look. So now we're going to trade away LeBron James to the Nets for Vince Carter. That's kind of where it is to me, right? Vince Carter, awesome player, first ballot Hall of Famer. Dude was a human highlight reel his whole career, was phenomenal with the Nets, especially when he was getting thrown alleys from Jason Kidd, who looked furious in their press conference today, by the way. Because he didn't know, because nobody knew. And I think, Kylan, I think that's the craziest part. There were no leaks. LeBron didn't know. Clutch Sports didn't know. Anthony Davis didn't know. Jason Kidd didn't know. None of these, Stephen A. Smith, nobody. Like, that's the part that gets me the most too, because like, this was such a pocket deal, a back alley deal where the Mavs should have shopped Luka in front of the whole league if they were going to try to trade him. Because apparently they were done with his antics and done with, his work ethic and whatever else is going on, the attitude, yelling at them, whatever it is. They could have gotten an egregious amount of more assets for trading Luka Doncic than what they got. And that's the sad part to me because this is a glass cannon team. Kyrie, AD, and Clay, all great players, all will be in the Hall of Fame someday. All of them have injury histories that are longer than CVS receipts. And I think that that's the sad part about this. So it is a crazy thing to kind of know where the two teams are and what they could look like moving forward, knowing that there's still so many other moves that need to be made too. So it's wild.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, it only takes one stupid GM, and apparently in Dallas they may have the dumbest GM possible.
But I want to say this though. So sorry to cut you off, but that's the crazy thing, because Nico was making all the right moves. right? He supported Luka Doncic. He traded for Kyrie Irving when nobody thought that was a good idea, and it worked out, right? Kyrie looks better than he's ever looked, quite frankly, which says a lot because, I don't know, he helped LeBron take down the Warriors and win the finals in
Right.
2016. That was almost 10 years ago, which is crazy. Now we're getting old,
Right.
Kyle, but it's crazy because you made all the right moves, all those trades at the deadline to bring in Daniel Gafford, drafting Derek Lively, who's a very good young player. You might remember this. When we were in grad school, I was telling you that something that the Mavs have needed for years was a center like Tyson Chandler who could stay in there and defend the paint while Dirk was out doing his thing on the wing, while Luka eventually was doing whatever the hell he wanted to do on the outside. At the time, I think Monte Ellis was on the Mavs at the time or somewhere around that.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they got that, right? PJ Washington was a phenomenal ad. Some of the moves they made this offseason were awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then this happens. Like, they took a team, and that's the crazy part. Luka took a team that was thrown together at the trade deadline and dragged them to the finals. Everyone was talking about them. Everyone was talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves and how great Anthony Edwards is, which he is. How awesome that team was. The Mavs went in there and got them in 5. That was Jason Kidd coaching his butt off. That was Luka Doncic going crazy. That was Kyrie Irving being the best Robin that we've seen in recent memory. And it's like, he made all these right moves and then does this. Like, once again, if you're going to trade him, which you shouldn't, but if you do, you need to get a better haul for him in return, because this is just like, it just feels like it was like, oh, I'm tired of this. Here you go. And there was no thought into it whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to cut you off, but I definitely think
you're
there's
good.
more to this story yet to come out, as you said, because this just seems kind of like going along with what you said. This is kind of like what happened with the Eagles, with the 49ers before that when they traded Terrell Owens. How it just felt like, get out, we don't want you no more. Like, obviously, with that, we all know Terrell Owens wore out his welcome. Now, we don't know what happened with Luka yet. Nico has basically fallen on the sword here, saying, I wanted to get rid of him. I didn't care. I feel like he's taking the bullet for the new owner, Adelson, who I don't think knows anything about that. If it's not gambling, she knows that her family knows nothing about that. So I think this is a real big gamble. And this is kind of like what happened with the Celtics last year, where the owner got out while the getting is good because, like, need somebody else to come in and actually pay all these guys. I feel like this is what happened here. Like, she thought about it and was like, I don't want to pay Luka Doncic 400 or 500 million a year. So bye-bye. So, like, I think that's what happened here. Like, it's a cheap owner, a dumb dude who, like I said, I know you're trying to, you're right. He's made some really good moves, but I don't know what happened. I think he was real stupid. And no offense to him personally. I don't know him. Don't really care to know him because he's the guy that fumbled Luka, fumbled Kristaps Porzingis, and fumbled Jalen Brunson. And before that, fumbled Steph Curry to Nike. This was the guy that misspelled Steph's name and all that stuff you heard about the Steph Curry presentation. So this dude has his stupid moments. And this might be the all-time dumbest moment. But, I just feel like this is probably him falling on the sword for the new owner. And this is kind of like how that even though they're saying what's Mark Cuban makes the basketball decisions, I think they locked him in a closet or temporarily lost his phone number because I don't know how he let this decision happen. So I think that's how he doesn't run the Mavericks anymore.
No, and I'm happy that you brought up ownership because I don't think, like, if Mark Cuban is still majority owner, this doesn't happen. I will say that with the utmost certainty. Now, there's also a lot of other things that go along with this, where this is a very family affair type thing, because something that's crazy, and the reason why nobody knew about it, and the only two people like in the organizations that knew were the two GMs, right? Nico Harrison and Rob Pelinka. The only two people that knew about this were those two. And the reason why is because those two have been making deals together for the last like 20, 25 years. And the reason for that is because, once again, you alluded to Nike, right? So For those who don't know, Nico Harrison used to be a higher up at Nike and was heavily involved with shoe deals and bringing big athletes to their label and all these different things. He's very close with LeBron. He's very close with a lot of other people, including Anthony Davis, who was on that. A lot of the U.S. Olympic team he's close with, which is the connection a lot of people are making because Kyrie and Anthony Davis played together for Team USA multiple times. So just USA basketball in general. And there's a big connection there. So a lot of people are, connecting the dots and saying, hey, like, this makes sense because those two are going to play really well together. And then they have Clay on the outside and yada, yada, yada. But it's like, it's that, right? And then Rob Pelinka used to be Kobe's agent when he was making deals with Nico Harrison. It's all like connected. And it's just crazy because, like, once again, like I mentioned the Mavs having a fear about Luka's work ethic and his ability to keep his body in shape and limit injuries over time and stuff like that. And then also, like I alluded to the ref situation where Luka became a bit of a pariah, especially last season during the playoffs, because he was yelling at the refs every 5 seconds, which is a problem. At the same time, like, Luka is that good of a player where as long as he's not doing something stupid off the court, I don't really care. Like, it's funny because as a Giants fan, I felt that way about OBJ too. Odell Beckham Jr. did some interesting things that got a lot of headlines, did a lot of stupid stuff, but it was nothing off the field. It was getting into a fight with Josh Norman. It was hitting a kicking net and letting that come back and hit him in the head. It was like 50 different things that didn't matter. And it was just like, it's crazy because there's so many layers to this. Because to kind of address like the teams moving forward, like the Mavs, like I alluded to, you can make an argument that the Mavs have the second best starting five only behind the Thunder in the West. You can make that argument. And you could have made that argument before too, but now with Anthony Davis in there, I could see them making a run because the logistics make sense. Anthony Davis came out, what was it, last week and was like, hey, like, I don't really want to play the 5. I'd rather play the 4, which apparently is his normal position that he hadn't played for years since he was in New Orleans. So it's like, okay. And then
the Pelicans, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, cool. And then, you have the Gafford and Lively at the 5. You have Anthony Davis at the 4. Clay and who I guess multiple different players. PJ Washington at the 3, Clay at the 2, and then Kyrie at the 1. Like, you can see where that team, because that's 3 NBA champions right there. Clay with multiple, obviously, with the Warriors. That's 3 NBA champions leading your franchise. If they all stay healthy, they're all all-star caliber players, except for Clay, a little bit on the back nine to some extent. But still, he's playing pretty well because he's getting wide open looks because everyone has to double Kyrie and at the time Luka. And it's, so there is a way that the Mavs are able to compete and win a championship. That is, in theory, possible. But like I alluded to, it's a glass cannon because what happens in 2 years? And like, you're telling me, I don't know what happens going to happen with Anthony Davis in 2 years. For all we know, Kyrie might want out in a year. Like, we don't know. Kyrie has not stayed somewhere for a long time since he was in Cleveland his entire career up to that point. So it's like, excuse me. So there's that, right? And then on the other side, yes, the Lakers are setting up their future for the next decade plus because they now have a superstar that LeBron can pass the torch to. But speaking of LeBron, this is a fun conversation for him because they have no front court anymore. They have no one that can step in there and defend the rim. So, sure, they beat the Knicks last night without Anthony Davis, and LeBron looked great in the Garden and did the whole deal and whatever. But it's like, in playoff basketball in the West, when you're going up against the Joker, when you're going up against several other players, Anthony Davis now with the Mavs, all the different players who are really good bigs, 4s and 5s, you're going to have a problem. And a lot of that is specifically because of the fact that they no longer have a true 5. And yes, this is a move for the future. But my gut tells me they're going to try to make another trade to try to get somebody in there. But at the same time, like, they're not playing for this year anymore. And they're like a middle seed in the West right now, too. They're a higher seed than the Mavs are because the Mavs have been dealing with injuries the whole season. So, I just, big picture, the Mavs got fleeced because they didn't get enough draft compensation. So their future is highly questionable right now. The Lakers And something else that I think is being discussed a little bit, but I want to hear more about too. I think part of the reason that this might be happening and the Lakers are flipping the script to move towards Luka as the face of the franchise now is because my gut tells me that they're tired of clutch sports, because there's all these different things where it's like, oh my God, we need this player at the deadline and we need this, and sign Bronny to this special contract that no G League player has ever had, and all these different things. And it's like, part of me is like, all right, Rob Pelinka and the Lakers brass could be like, all right, cool. We're tired of this. We're taking back our team. Anthony Davis, goodbye. We brought you in here. You helped us win a championship. Congratulations. Thank you. See you never. And now who knows what's going to happen with LeBron? LeBron, according to Chris Hayes, is not going to be waiving his no trade clause before the deadline. But that's where my mind initially went. I'm like, if you're LeBron, how are you going to – who the hell knows what's going to happen when they come back? Maybe they get a center. Maybe they, do someone of DeAndre Jordan's level to just stand there and play the five, and then bounce around, and you have Luka and you have LeBron on the wing.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I just think that they're just going to do the YOLO thing for a while. They'll get somebody like a Clint Capella, try to finally fleece somebody from somebody in the free agency. I think that this is a trade. I mean, it's very reminiscent of what happened with the Knicks and the Timberwolves to me, right? It's a trade where I feel like both teams got worse, right? Like, I feel like what I'm seeing is, obviously, with all due respect to Luka Doncic, he can learn a lot from LeBron. I think that they should keep them together. I don't know that it ends up going to the playoffs. Personally, I see them getting eliminated by the Nuggets one way or the other in the first round or the second round. And then I feel like the Nuggets are then going to get eliminated by the Thunder. I feel like this is great if you're an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, because the team that put you out got worse. The team that you were also worried about, the Timberwolves, they got rid of their glue guy, so they're worse. Like, this is great for you because everybody's worse, and you don't even have Chet Holmgren on the floor yet. So, like, everybody got worse. And you're just sitting there just waiting on Chet Holmgren to get healthy. So, like, everybody got worse.
Yeah, no, and I feel that. And I think that's something that definitely works in their favor. I'm going to push back on the Knicks thing, though, because the Knicks definitely got better. I disagree with that. I think this is the first time in, like, well, I'm going to pull punches. I'm not pulling punches. They're a hell of a lot better than the Sixers are, and the Sixers have more star power. So I think – and that's not a conversation.
The Sixers are injured. The Sixers are injured. The Sixers are injured.
You know what? All I'm going to say is this for now. And this, I know you probably have a lot of friends from Philly who are probably watching this and are going to watch it and whatever. So a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this. The Sixers will be playing in Jersey before they win an NBA championship with Joel Embiid. He is not to use a Marvel term, he's not an anchor being. He's not. We saw that. We saw they trusted the process. They did all of that. He's a great player. He is on a Hall of Fame trajectory. He's an MVP. He's all these different things. And maybe, and it's funny because I'm bringing up Embiid now, maybe this is what the Mavs are seeing, right? Where the Mavs didn't necessarily think that Luka, according to them, despite his talent, did not see that Luka is a guy that you can win a championship with because he's not that type of guy.
So they went with
That's the way I feel about Joel Embiid.
So they went with Kyrie.
And that's the whole thing.
They went with the zombie that is Klay Thompson, all due respect to him. And then what's left of AD's body at 32 years old for the next 3 years. And I mean, look, I'll give it to you, man. Like, they went with there's a lot of people that my friend group that love the Villanova Wildcats, so they're Knicks fans by default. But we can talk about your Knicks and how they're gonna fall off in the playoffs I think this is hilarious coming from somebody whose team lost to the Pacers, who didn't have anything other than Tyrese Halliburton.
Hold on a second. Let's be very clear. The Pacers actually also had Pascal Siakam, and they were pretty good. And the Knicks had everybody hurt except Jalen Brunson, who then I think broke his thumb or something.
And it was a Game 4. Who killed Joe, specifically Tyrese Halliburton.
No, and here's the thing, right? So, But no, the reason I'm bringing it up is because this is the first time, I don't know if it's ever, but for at minimum, like 50 years, that the Knicks have 2 starters in the All-Star game. And I think the Knicks are a team that's interesting because they're built to be able to compete against the Celtics, right? So from a talent standpoint and from a physical wing standpoint, with having all those, the taller wings, the positionless basketball that the NBA has been going to for years now, and everything else. And I think that they have guys who can actually compete in that on that level. Now, will they play the Celtics? That's going to be the fun part, because you and I know it's the same thing, right? It's the reason why the Mavs destroyed the Timberwolves in the playoffs last year is because the Jason Kidd went small. And he was like, all right, cool. We're going to go super small, and we're going to force Rudy Gobert, the defensive player of the year, to still be on the floor as the 5 and put him on an island against Kyrie, against Luka, against whoever. And he's not going to be able to cover them every single time down the floor. And that, to me, like the combination of Jalen Brunson and Cat and Mikal Bridges and everybody else they got going over there, they've got something that they're cooking. Now, once again, it's they got to do it, right? They got to be in the playoffs. They got to do what they have to do. But I don't think the Knicks are just as talented as most. They're not more talented than the Celtics, but they're knocking on the door, and I think that there's hype, right, which makes you scared, because whenever there's hype and everyone's pushing in the national media, there's always something going on, and something might not pan out. It's just the way it goes. Hence the Dallas Cowboys. Shout out to all my Cowboys fans out there. But it is a very interesting dynamic for them moving forward. And to pivot back to the Mavs for a second, they have some pieces in place. They have a lot of depth, and that's the part that like still throws me off about the trade. They have a team that can compete for a championship even before they made this trade. And I think that they could still compete for a championship, but their window was a lot smaller. And that's the part that gets me, where you can't see what the future looks like past these X number of years, because you have 3 players who are wild cards in that department. And who knows what'll happen, but it is a wild trade that kept me up. I did not get a lot of sleep last night. I was at the station late. I didn't get back to the station until like 1 o'clock in the morning. So I was like knee deep in all this by the time I even got to my apartment. And then I was going down the rabbit hole even further. And so it's a wild thing. And I think when push comes to shove, only time will tell. But like, it wouldn't surprise me. Like, Luka's the type of guy that would get a chip on his shoulder. Like, don't be surprised if he comes back in like a year and has a 6-pack and is breaking through walls like Superman and be like, all right, cool, Dallas Mavericks, here's 80 points. Like, that wouldn't surprise me.
I say the same thing, because Danny knows how I feel about, not to cut him off, about talking about these guys that are taller than most of us and being 270 pounds. It's not like he was Shaquille O'Neal out here. He knows. I felt the same way every time he or somebody else brought up that Joel Embiid is fat. I don't understand how you can judge somebody who's, in Luka's case, 6'8", 6'9", whatever he is, 6'6", 6'9" with shoes, whatever he is, right? I don't understand how you can say somebody's fat when I watch him, as fat as he is, just take your best shot, and is taking people down to the lane, making threes that even I'm like, yo, I don't know how many times either one of us were in each other's apartment watching a Luka Doncic game, and I'm like, there's no way he's making that 3 from half court, and somehow he makes it. So like,
and that's the thing though, right? Like, that's it right there. If he's playing like this now, imagine what happens if he ever actually does flip that switch, right? Maybe being around LeBron, like people said, maybe that'll make him switch, because nobody puts more money into his body than LeBron. Maybe Derrick Henry, that's a possibility. But it is like, it is. If he finds a way to flip that switch, we haven't even seen the best of Luka yet, and he's on the trajectory to be one of the best players ever. So
I'm gonna switch my thing. I totally agree with you that Luka Doncic is the new face of the Lakers. Move over LeBron James. Don't know that'll equal championships, because I need to see other corresponding moves, as you said. But I think right now, I don't think either team. I feel like the Lakers have their future secured, right? But I still look at both of these teams as first round or second round exits based on the matchup currently, without seeing the corresponding moves, because 4 days from now is the NBA trade deadline. So The Lakers could get Clint Capella, and I'm still gonna be like, they're a second round exit. Danny knows, as he's seen, because I told him Luka Doncic was gonna get traded eventually. What I say comes true. So, I am of the mindset that the consequence of this is, like I said, y'all need to listen to what I say, right? Like I told Danny again, I wasn't thinking it was gonna come 6 years after I said it, but it
You
came.
also said to trust the process, though, and that really hasn't worked so far, if I'm not
Well,
mistaken.
look, well,
So,
look, well, look. I
but
told you two things what happened. I told you Joel Embiid would destroy all these AD is better accomplish things, and he's done that. I told you it wouldn't be close between Jokic and Embiid one way or the other, and it's not. I'm of the mindset that as far as the consequence of this blockbuster, if you are not a Joel Embiid who has a guaranteed no trade clause until October, you're not safe, and you should expect that if you got beef with your front office, that you're going to get traded. Like I feel like
yeah,
if you are a superstar here, I think Karl Anthony Towns showed this with the disloyalty with Minnesota and New York. New York showed this with Dante DiVincenzo. Obviously, we know if you work a 9 to 5, I say this all the time. I've said it at Newhouse. I'll say it anywhere. I've said it to, even though I work in a media organization, I tell people all the time, there's no reason to ever be loyal to the company you work for, because at the end of the day, you're hired to be fired, right? You're only as good as the work you do, and that's it. Like, and then this is taken to even more to 1,000 in sports, right? You're only as good as,
yeah.
like I said, a GM that's stupid enough to trade you, right? So, like, there's no need to be loyal to these people. To these teams, especially. I mean, look at Karl Anthony Towns, look at Zach LaVine. We'll get to him because something just broke, and that's why I've been looking at my phone, because another one just broke as far as a trade. You ain't got to look far to know that if you're one of these, I call them the Jimmy Butlers of the NBA, middling, okay superstars that ain't going nowhere, but you're like a superstar just because you're on a really bad team, you're going to get traded. So that's the consequence of this. And also, like I said earlier, everybody that thinks that they can pull off a superstar trade at 2K now thinks their dumb trades are going to come true now. Danny?
Well, yeah. Well, it's funny because I was just about to bring up De'Aaron Fox, and this happened not too long after we got started here. So this is good to bring this up. I
I
think,
already got it.
to me, like, they sent Stephon Castle. No, they did not. That is crazy.
They're
So,
not convinced to find Castle.
being someone who now covers the UConn Huskies, Stephon Castle's been balling. And the fact that the Spurs looks like they did not have to move him, now have him as a number 3 option. And like now something that I said, and I said this even before the Olympics, and I let people know during the Olympics. Wemby's time is coming. Dion's like, I'm coming. Wemby's coming. Somebody like, and I want to say this to bring back to Luka. Well, yes, Wemby's here, but to bring back to Luka to 1 second, dog, the Mavs, pick up the phone, call San Antonio, and say, hey, I want Stephon Castle. I want X number of draft picks, and then send him there. Or send him anywhere where there are players and draft picks that could be thrown in to make sense. Like, the whole thing is just so crazy to me because to the point, like, yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't know about you, but I think this is the most active, well, especially with the blockbuster from last night, but this is the most active trade deadline of the NBA that we've seen in a while. In part because I think a lot of people are shocked about the move, and we're going to see what happens.
We haven't seen a trade months like this since James Harden got traded 2 years ago. So yeah,
exactly. And we still haven't seen, to my knowledge, anything about Jimmy Butler. We still haven't seen anything.
That's not going to happen. I can tell you that. I have no sourcing on that, but that's not that. Pat Riley, he ain't moving.
Well, I mean, he's not going to give him away for nothing, but like, he's not going to pay him. So yeah. I think
4 days from now is coming. We'll see, but I highly doubt that he gets traded anywhere but to Phoenix or NBA Siberia somewhere. Like he might end up in Sacramento.
And then that's Bradley Beal, right? Like
he's going to end up somewhere where his impact is going to be minimum. Because Pat Riley is that petty. You know that.
Well, yes. Now it depends, right? Because I think that I think Jimmy Butler can still be a really good contributor on a team. Excuse me, but only time will tell. But it's the quick triggers, and it's something not exactly the same thing, but it's a similar thing in the NFL, right? It's like every year you see 7 or 8 head coaches get fired, and that's it's a lot of impatientness, right? So it's like if a player isn't happy, which is once again the crazy thing about Lucas' whole situation, because according to several sources, that are big name people, he would have signed that super max contract and then stayed in Dallas for the next 10 years. So it's like the quick trigger is an interesting thing because there's been a lot of hopping around in the NBA anyway, and who's going to be the next domino, and who's going to figure out X, Y, and Z. And who knows? I just it's wild.
I already told you the next big domino is Giannis. Giannis is not staying in Milwaukee in a minute. It'll be over soon. I have no sourcing on that, but I told you I said Luka. It'll be Giannis. Everybody think it's going to be Joel Embiid. It's not going to be Embiid. It'll be Luka. Giannis will get out of Milwaukee to stay in the East, but go somewhere. Hint.
I thought Chris Middleton might be
probably very close. Probably very close to me. Hint. I think that you will be seeing a move, not February 6th, obviously, but I think Giannis won't be in Milwaukee much longer. And who knows? I'm not saying that that's going to be anytime soon. But
who are they trading to absorb his salary?
Huh?
Who are they trading to absorb his salary? Are they going to move on Paul George right now, which was an interesting signing from the jump? Because I like Paul George. Seems like a great guy. Highly overrated. I'm sorry, he is. That's a separate conversation, but.
Paul George is not right now. He's not going anywhere. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up to think that there's going to be a Paul George Giannis trade in 4 days. I don't think that at all. Let's not get people's hopes up. Like I said, no sourcing on this.
No.
Because I don't want no hot takes. Colin said Giannis and Paul George trade is happening in 4 days. I did not say that. I have no sourcing again. Danny's trying to get a viral moment here. I have no sourcing on this. But I said Luka was gone and he's gone 6 years later. So Giannis won't be in Milwaukee much longer. Enjoy it while you can.
I think Chris Middleton's interesting too.
Oh, Chris Middleton's probably gone. He's probably gone in 4 days.
Because he's always he's I've always really liked his game, but to me, he's you think they would move him first because they would want to do everything they could to keep Giannis. And who knows what's going to happen. Like, speaking of the Mavs, like people have been rumoring, Giannis to the Mavs forever. Like that's something that we heard 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
Because Mark Cuban really wanted Giannis. So around the time when he did initially sign his big extension. So who knows? But
yeah. As far as De'Aaron Fox, this is great for him. He gets to go be his normal 2-guard self, play off ball. Doesn't have to be a PG because Chris Paul is there. And then you have your PG of the future if he wants to be a point guard, but he really is not a point guard. So that's the only problem for the Spurs is they don't really have a true point guard. I mean, you might be able to get away with the Stephon Castle at the 2, De'Aaron Fox at the 1, just throw it to Wemby or whatever.
Wasn't Chris Paul still there?
Yeah, Chris Paul's still there. I'm just saying that he won't, Chris Paul
won't be around forever.
He won't be around forever. Like, it looks great right now. They're definitely a playoff team, especially now that they have a second scorer who can actually score consistently in De'Aaron Fox. Great for him. Now, hopefully, he'll sign his max extension. If you're a Spurs fan, I don't know why you would do all this if you don't have it guaranteed. Great for the Kings. I feel like the Zach LaVine thing was more of a way to appease what's his name from the Raptors who they just got, or the Bulls. I mean, I think this is a way to reunite
DeMar DeRozan,
DeMar and Zach. And I think that's great for Zach LaVine. I think it's good. Here's what I'll say. We grew up in the days where Sacramento was interesting. The NBA is always better when Sacramento is interesting, and this guarantees that they will contend at least for the next, like you said, a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years max, and then it'll fall apart because the younger guys, because obviously Zach LaVine and DeMar are in the older sides of their 20s/30s, so they're in the later halves of their prime, so it'll fall off eventually. But I mean, I just feel sorry for all those players who came to Sacramento for De'Aaron Fox just to see him leave. And I will say, you dogged the Sixers. I remember all them texts, but Daryl Morey looks really smart, not trading Tyrese Maxey for anything. And I said this, like, they shouldn't trade Tyrese Maxey for anything because you'll never get that return on somebody who, like you said, is coming into their prime, 23, 24, and you have your future face. You don't get rid of that. Now, obviously, you see with the Mavericks and the Kings what happens when you don't make sure that you got a guarantee, right? And you can say all that you like. Everybody can say all that they like about Daryl Morey, but he made sure that no matter what he did, that Tyrese Maxey was going to sign on the dotted line. Speaking of clutch, sign on that dotted line, and he signed on that dotted line. And
like,
you can say what you want to say, but this is the year, the least amount of drama we've had out of Philadelphia, and drama everywhere else. Now,
and here's my thing too. So the Kings are just disappointing because they were really good. Mike Brown won Coach of the Year. They were a 3 seed, 2, whatever the hell they were, and then they fell off. And Sabonis has been great for them. De'Aaron Fox is a very good player, and he'll be fun to watch with Wemby, especially because he'll be able to get one-on-ones and ISOs nonstop, and he's lightning fast. So in transition, it'll be a wrap. But the Kings, getting Zach LaVine does not make the Kings better. Because, in my opinion, De'Aaron Fox is better than Zach LaVine. And I think that's safe. And, I don't Harrison Barnes is an interesting player too. As someone who's an older veteran role player, I think the Spurs, assuming Pop is healthy.
I gave them their respect. I said they're definitely a playoff team. They are building. This is what happened when we were kids. When they started getting all them random players, this is how a Spurs dynasty happens. Now, I am not saying that Wemby's going to get 5 rings in San Antonio. Probably more, probably like 1 or 2. But this is how you start a dynasty in San Antonio, by building all these young players together. I'm not saying a dynasty is happening. I'm just saying as the San Antonio part of it all, they have that young face to grow with Wemby now. They already had it with Stefan Cancer, but they have the established face now.
It's only a matter of time until a superstar, a real, so De'Aaron Fox is an all-star, but when a superstar decides to force his way to San Antonio or signs with San Antonio in free agency or forces a trade there, whatever it might be, it's only a matter of time until that happens. And when that happens, they'll be back on top again. Because
who's that superstar? Take a guess.
I don't know.
You can take a guess, bro. I took one with Luka and Giannis and came out 1 or 2. So you can take a guess. Take a guess. I'm not gonna be mad if you say Joel Embiid. I think you're wrong, but hey, you could be right. Who knows?
I think Joel needs to get ready to start playing for the French national team. But we are here in a situation where I'm kidding, obviously, but also But to me, when you look at I don't know, honestly. I've gone back and forth. It's because it needs to be a guard, right? And is it someone do the Celtics break up eventually, and is it a Jaylen Brown on the wing? Is it? I threw out the idea, I told you, the Spurs have assets. I trading Luka Doncic there would have made sense from an asset standpoint. I don't. I'm trying to think of some other good player that are wings that would be.
All right. Well, you think it's a wing? I think that Wemby needs to move over to power forward because he's more of a power forward to me than a center. But I'm of the mindset that I think that we'll see. It could be Sabonis. I think that we're of the mindset that I think Sabonis won't be there much longer either. I think the Kings. The Kings are clearly selling. So if you like a player on the Kings and you're an NBA person that listens to this podcast, I would say you go talk to the Kings about Sabonis. There's nothing else valuable on the Kings right now. I mean, I like the guy. I like the guy from near you from Providence who just started playing again, Carter.
Yeah.
But I doubt they trade him this early. Um, but yeah, as far as this goes, I think the Kings are okay. Like they can survive now more than I thought they would without the Aaron Fox. I think the Spurs are a playoff team. They'll probably get to the second round, probably shock somebody. In the playoffs this year, and I think they're coming. I don't know if I'll ever put them in the next few years. I don't think anybody's going to be better than the Thunder for the next few years because I think as long as the Thunder, which it seems they're clear to do, as long as they keep that core of Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander together, I think that there's a couple championships coming their way. I think that's where we're headed. We're headed for a Thunder versus somebody in the East, and I think unless it's a team, I can see them beating the Celtics. I think that if it's the Celtics, if it's the Cavs, if it's the Knicks, as unlikely as I think that is to happen, the Knicks getting to the finals. If that does happen, I feel like the Thunder will have an easy road with either of those three teams. I feel like the toughest matchup for them would probably be the Celtics, and even that I don't think goes more than 5 or 6 games. Just because I think the Celtics are ripe to be beaten this year. I don't think they're as good as they were last year. I think a lot. I think a lot. I think a lot depends on everything else. But yeah, so let's move on. We got some other things to get to. According to the Baltimore Banner, Baltimore Ravens kicker, that's a mouthful. Justin Tucker has been accused of inappropriate behavior towards that massage therapist, now 9 in Baltimore. Danny, what's your reaction to this?
Obviously, it's tough. You know, this is not the first time that something like this has happened with a popular player in the NFL. Um, and it's one of those things where it's hard to put into words, honestly, because you just don't think like something like that would happen. But apparently, it did. And we'll see how far Jordan, Justin Tucker. We'll see how
Sure,
far
Tucker.
Justin Tucker ends up continuing to play because he was kind of, and I think that's the difference between this and Deshaun Watson a little bit from a playing standpoint, because when push comes to shove, this is a bad thing. This is going to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. Yet at the time, Deshaun Watson was still given $230 million guaranteed, which to this day is still the worst contract in the history of sports, in my opinion.
I think we
Um,
agree on that. We agree on
and
that.
I think Justin Tucker, there's a lot of people who believe, including myself, that Justin Tucker, non-playoff success limited, is the most talented kicker that's ever played in the NFL. Obviously, Adam Vinatieri comes to mind about the rings and whatnot, but
Right.
it is, it's just sad. I wish I could provide more insight. I really do. Just in general, I just hope that you know this stuff doesn't happen, and it is crazy to think that because how many years ago is this again? Too, it's been a minute. So the
Yeah,
fact that
2012 to 2016, and apparently these women have been trying to share their story, but people have, as they would until
yeah,
people like us
true.
start investigating, took it as gossip or people trying to like assassinate the character of Tucker, right? Which, you know, no offense
It
to these women at all, but this is it's hard to explain. I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is the power dynamic here. Obviously, like you have massage therapists, probably early 20s, 30-year-olds now, mid 20s, 30s now, like women who are just massage therapists versus the powerful NFL player. And these are the dynamics here. This is why I get real sociological. Danny's used to this.
well,
This is the
yeah.
power. This is the power dynamic here, and why most people didn't believe this until it showed up in the Baltimore Banner. And to Justin Tucker's defense here, he did emphatically deny it, as anybody or any lawyer, any legal person worth their salt would tell him to do. And if this is true, then he needs to be held to task for it as much as you can. I mean, I think some of this stuff that was in the article is gruesome and all this. Not even like it's not to a level of the Deshaun Watson, but just that it was egregious enough that he was banned from the massage therapist. Like, he was rubbing his penis on these women who were just trying to do their job and everything. And like I said off air to Danny, like, all we know is this period from 2012 to 2016. So what might work in his favor as far as consequences, as Danny brought up, is we haven't heard anything from like now in the 2020s. And that's not a defense for that's not a defense for him. That's just how these things work. For those of you that don't know, like the NFL looks at like, how we saw this with Ray Rice, right? How egregious is it? What's the damage done to us PR wise? And then can we basically slap you on the wrist, but make it seem like we're wagging our finger because, we want to make sure that we're doing enough to make it look like, and they do, but like to make it look like we're doing enough to care about our female fans, because there are a lot of women, obviously, who love football. And Danny and I know some of them. And like, I'm not defending this behavior at all. Like I said earlier, I think it's egregious. But this is just the stuff that Danny and I know that's at play here. So I don't want any shock if it's a slap on the wrist.
And one of the complicated things about situations like this period is that there are countless times where the star athlete, the movie star, the politician, the whoever it might be who is in a position of power and has massive resources at their disposal make it difficult for victims to share their stories and say what happened and actually have accountability for what in this situation may have taken place or what took place in different situations that have been public knowledge for a long time. And I think that's the whole thing about this too. And that's why, it is important that people speak up, because your voice can be silenced by people who are powerful enough and who have the influence to silence your voice. And, and it's a difficult situation. And, once again, it sucks, and it really, really sucks that stuff like this happens. And I hope that this never happens. But, it's we're going to see how the NFL decides to handle it, because they have an interesting track record of not handling things correctly. So it's complicated. More details on this. I wish I was more knowledgeable about this specific situation, because I have not done as much research as I would like. So I don't know how much further I want to dive into it, honestly, because I just don't want to start spewing stuff. But it is a really sad thing that I really hope is not going to be, that is going to be dealt with in a way that it needs to be dealt with. And that is, hoping that the victims end up being in a position to get the support that they need, and that, correct actions are taken. So it's a tough thing for sure.
I agree. So hard pivot here, as we've done a couple of times during this tough stuff. But the Philadelphia Eagles, speaking of the DMV, beat down the Washington Commanders in the NFC Championship game. And our reaction to this, I will start first. I said last week that this was feeling like 2017, 2018. I told Morgan, and she kind of scoffed at it, but this is my feeling. Danny knows these feelings often come true. I don't have no basis on it, but I said that, like, I feel like this is going to be 2017, and I said this last week, that this NFC Championship game was not going to be close, and it wasn't. But I didn't think 55 points to 23. I didn't think that. I thought more like 40-20. I felt more like 45-35, something a lot closer, because it was a rivalry game. But I mean, you saw Saquon come out with that toss. I know, hurting your heart. Taking it, scoring that touchdown, and like with the get off me for the first touchdown. And I just think this is what happens when the Eagles, I think this is what I think happened here. Before this game, I think the Eagles wanted their get back because they beat Kenny Pickett the last time, because as I know as a Giants fan, terrible fields, but we all know that the Commander Stadium in Landover, Maryland has the worst field in the division. And so, when Jalen
I don't know
Hurts
about that.
take it out,
But
all right, I know MetLife is a close first.
yeah,
But when Jalen went down with a concussion, right? I knew that this get back was coming. But I think what happened here is Kellen Moore. I think the Cowboys did the Eagles a solid, right? They didn't hire Kellen Moore, and then he called the game of his life, right? Danny saw my tweets. I called this the Kellen Moore. This is Kellen Moore going Jimmy Butler. Brian Schottenheimer over me, and that's what happened here. Like, he called the perfect game. The Eagles were looking for revenge. They got their revenge. Dropped the double nickels. They said like a la Kendrick Lamar. They not like us. The Commanders are not like the Eagles, and they showed it, right. And this is why I say the Eagles are going to be a tough out because they don't lose rematch Super Bowls just as the Patriots, right? So I feel like this is a great game for the Eagles. This should scare you. I said this before. It should scare you right now that the Eagles are winning these close games and they really haven't had an offensive showcase yet. And then they had the offensive showcase against the Commanders. I'm gonna let Danny go because I know he's got lengthy things to say. So go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll address the elephant in the room in a minute, but I think one of the big things about the Eagles is that they have the recipe, right? They have the defense, they have the offense that is capable of exploding when they want to and when they need to. I think Jalen Hurts gets a lot of crap because at the end of the day, like, I'll get into Saquon in a sec, but like, Saquon Barkley is the best player on this team. They would not be here without him. Period. I'll be honest; they might not have made the playoffs without him. That's a separate conversation. But I do think that
don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. They made the
they're
playoffs without him last year.
no. All right, I'll take that back. I'll take that back. They probably would have made the playoffs, but I don't think they're definitely not in the championship game without, like, by the NFC championship game without Saquon. So, but once again, I'll save that for the Saquon monologue in a second. To me, they have all the different pieces they need. Obviously, they have the best offensive line in the game, best running back in the game, two Pro Bowl-esque wide receivers, a Pro Bowl caliber tight end, and I'm pretty sure Dallas got it. And if he didn't make it Pro Bowl, I know he got votes. So you got that, and a young defense that Vic Fangio is coaching his ass off on, by the way. And to me, I really enjoyed Jaden Daniels. I loved him in college. I got to see him with my own eyes when I was down in SEC country. I saw him in the SEC championship against Georgia, and obviously Georgia destroyed them in that game. But it was Jaden Daniels. He is someone who's special, and the fact that he was able to elevate the Commanders, who were projected to have like 4 wins this season, to put them in that situation. I'm not going to say, like, listen, the Eagles beat who they beat, and I'm not trying to minimize the loss. But their defense is god-awful. And I'll be honest, if the Eagles didn't drop at least 35 in that game, we would be having a much different conversation than we're having right now, because the Commanders, yes, it's a divisional game. You never know what the hell can happen. Weird things pop up in divisional games. It's always like that. Doesn't matter who it is. They'll fight, right? But it's the Eagles are the better team. The Eagles are more talented on both sides of the ball. And they took care of business the way they needed to on their home field, and understandably so. Now, and I think that the Eagles are interesting to me because they hit me hard and home in different ways. The second one is the fact that I cover the Georgia Bulldogs. So there are a lot of Georgia Bulldogs on that defense specifically who are really freaking good. I covered Jalen Carter. I was around that team when they won the national championship, before he had all the off the field stuff with the car accident and everything that happened there, which ended up allowing him to fall to the Eagles in the first place because he was supposed to be the number 1 overall pick. He wasn't supposed to be at number 8. And Eagles fans are seeing that now, right? You're seeing a guy who is unstoppable in there, who pushes the pocket. Jordan Davis, another Georgia Bulldog, is a monster in there. So after all those years of having all these phenomenal pass rushers and these phenomenal defensive linemen who set the culture for them and really allowed the Eagles defense to be as dangerous as it was when they did win the Super Bowl in 2017, they have rebuilt that with a lot of young players, especially, now Nakobe Dean got hurt, obviously, but, there's a lot of other players who are part of this, Cooper DeJean. I said it on draft night. The fact that Cooper DeJean fell out of the back end of the first round and fell to the Eagles was wild. Obviously there's other players as well, but they've done a phenomenal job. I can't remember exactly what years it was, and I think we've had this conversation before. I've told you how much I can't stand Howie Roseman because Howie Roseman is the best GM in football, and it's not close. Like he makes other GMs look like what happened in the NBA last night. That is it's he's playing chess and everyone else is playing checkers. It doesn't matter what their cap situation looks like. He finds a way to sign somebody to bring in to do whatever. He has hit on. I saw something the other day. Their first and second and most of their third round draft picks, dating back over the last 4 seasons, are all players who are not only contributors but are guys who are legitimate stars and who are big pieces to this championship run that they're on right now, dating back to Devontae Smith and whoever else and everything along those lines.
You know my conspiracy theory, and I texted you this. I think he follows you, dog. I think he follows you. You went to Georgia.
No, I said it. Listen. I said it. No, you want to know who it was too? Nolan Smith.
Yeah.
That night, I was in Augusta, Georgia, in the newsroom on the first night of the draft, and I was like, I was getting ready to go on and do whatever, and I just did my 11 o'clock news, and I was stepping out because it was late first round, so it passed that time, and I really needed to focus on the Falcons and the Panthers because those are the 2 regional teams to Augusta, and I'm like, you've got, and I was focusing on all the Georgia Bulldogs, obviously, because that's also in the South Carolina Gamecocks and Clemson Tigers and players like that. When they draft, I was like, Jalen Carter, I was annoyed about, and I had Jalen Carter in video of him, like. You know the highlight in the SEC championship game against LSU where he picked up the guy with one arm? I was on the sideline for that. I saw that with my own 2 eyes from the sideline. And it was – and that's just one play of Jalen Carter being Jalen Carter. But, it's – Nolan Smith is a culture guy, man. He was like that the same way I felt about Brock Bowers and why Brock Bowers falling to 10 and going to the Raiders was – or 11, whatever the hell it was egregious. Or 9, wherever the hell he went. It was 9 or something like that.
Well, I wanted him on the Eagles as a Dallas guy.
No, I love Malik Neighbors. I saw Malik Neighbors with my own eyes and covering, Georgia and all that when he was at LSU. I saw him. I knew how good he was, and I was like, I want Malik Neighbors. I don't want Marvin Harrison Jr. He's the guy I want. Brock Bowers was the other guy for me. I listen. They were giving Brock Bowers tight end handoffs on end arounds, and he was taking the ball 70 yards to the house as a tight end. Like
that's how I feel about the tight end from Penn State. I feel like he shouldn't leave the state. If it's not the Eagles, he needs to go to Pittsburgh. He should not leave the state. The kid from Penn State,
dude's phenomenal.
He should not leave. He should not leave the state. That's how.
That's
how I
the
feel
point,
about
right?
The dude
so
from Penn State.
To go back to Howie Roseman for a second. His ability to pair drafting with free agent signings to create an opportunity to thrive and have players who can get the most out of them and put them in situations to succeed, that is what makes a good GM. Hitting on the draft, being efficient in free agency, making trades that matter, fleecing the Tennessee Titans to get A.J. Brown, which is still a stupid trade, and why Mike Vrabel got fired because he couldn't deal with the nonsense over there anymore. And all this different stuff sets the stage for a player like Saquon Barkley to have possibly the best running back season that anybody's ever had. And I think as a Giants fan, as someone who still loves Saquon, like, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. It is hard. Having said that, I'm happy for him because this is the player that the Giants drafted at number 2 overall instead of drafting a quarterback like Sam Darnold at the time or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or anybody. I knew he could be this. He had flashes of this. He had certain seasons where I mentioned OBJ earlier. He only had one season where he overlapped with OBJ. And it was Eli's last year as a starter, right? So, like, they had competent quarterback play, an ace wide receiver, and then Saquon Barkley, where he had 91 catches out of the backfield, in part because Eli needed to get him the ball because he knew that the Giants' offensive line was god-awful. So they couldn't run the ball. Like, Saquon was always getting hit in the backfield before he even got, like, those crazy numbers that are out there about the Eagles getting him 8 to 10 yards downfield before he even takes contact on most of his runs is absolutely insane. Because the second that he gets to the second level, it's over. Like, there are no linebackers, there are no safeties who are tackling him one-on-one. Nobody. And in a situation where you can bring him to the Eagles, the Giants decide not to pay him the extra $1 million. Obviously, everyone saw that on Hard Knocks and how all that played out. And which is also very
let that air.
No, so, and I'm not. I don't want to make this about the Giants, but that is a very non-Giants like thing. Like when you think about the Giants and how traditional the franchise has been since their inception, they're not a reality show team. That's the Jets. And they were on that and they looked stupid. That's the reality of the situation. And the fact that, because they had overall approval before it was edited and sent out. So the fact that they even allowed John Mara to have that, I'm not going to be sleeping well, the fact they even let that air is still mind boggling to me. But that's besides the point. Back to Saquon. He goes to Philly, gets the money that he wants, or some of the money that he wants at least. Then he knows from day one he's going to be playing behind the best offensive line in the league and the best offensive line he's ever played behind. He knows he's going to a place that has a competent quarterback who is a good quarterback when he's actually in a position to throw it. I'm tired of people like I don't know what you've been saying exactly about Jalen, but I'll tell you this: like the fact that people have been, oh my God, he can't do this and can't do that. Yeah, sure. Would I like him to throw over 300 yards a game? That'd be great, right? But Saquon Barkley is by far the best player on the Eagles, period. I'm not hearing any other argument from that. We know what he is, and this is why the Eagles are in this situation that they're in right now, because Saquon Barkley is so good that he transcends everything around him, which is what you want to say about a quarterback, but you're saying it about your running back. So whining about Jalen not, oh my God, he's only throwing for 187 yards in a game, and can they do this to try to beat the Chiefs, which we'll get to? It's like, at the end of the day, he is giving the ball to their best player. Put the ball in the hands of your best player and let him cook. That's what this is. Because once again, behind the best offensive line he's ever played, behind with a competent quarterback who is very good and a Pro Bowl level quarterback when he wants to be, and then 2-star wide receivers and a tight end. The other defense, even if they try to focus on Saquon, they can't do it because it's not like the Giants where they would stack 10 people in the box to deal with Saquon because they knew that Saquon was the option when you have Daniel Jones and whoever else out there, right? As opposed to the Eagles where if they play man one-on-one on the outside, Jalen can exploit that with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who are two of the better receivers in the league. So to me, that's what makes the Eagles special. And I think, once again, I expected them to beat the Commanders. The Commanders had a great season, but they overachieved by many metrics. And now the fun happens, right? We're going to see if rubber meets the road. We're going to see if Spags, shout out to Spags, who in my opinion is, well, at least in the hardware category, is the best defensive coordinator in the history of the league. And we're going to find out if they can actually bottle up Saquon and make it so he doesn't wreck the game with these 70-yard touchdowns.
Spoiler alert, he won't be able to because it's a catch-22, right? This is not the Super Bowl from last year where you had Miles Sanders back. I mean, we'll get to this in a minute, but
yeah,
I mean, they'll try, and then they will exploit having AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, and the fact that there's nothing there besides Justin Watson, because, as you so eloquently put it, their best cornerback now plays in Tennessee because they didn't want to pay him. And so we'll move right along to the other half, which I know was a heartbreak for not Danny, but the people who we both know in Buffalo. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship game. So the best team in New York, in the whole state. I know some of you Yankees fans are mad, but it's the Buffalo Bills by a lot.
No, don't do that.
Okay, the Knicks. Okay, all right, I'll leave it alone. But the Buffalo Bills, unfortunately for them, fell to the Kansas City Chiefs. And last week, Danny, I was singing the praises. I was listening to Morgan. Classic mistake listening to a Giants fan. I went with my Northeast bias instead of I did what you have heard me say before in your car and in your room. I did what I say I would never do, which is bet against the God QB, which was Patrick Mahomes. I was looking at my eyes and my head and saying, there's nothing there but Patrick Mahomes. Buffalo has no defense, but this is going to be a shootout. But there's nothing there but Patrick Mahomes. I think Josh Allen can actually do it this time. I forgot that Patrick Mahomes turns your favorite guys into Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, and other people who will never win championships because they're in the same division same conference as Michael Jordan. And that's what happened here. You brought up Tiger Woods off air. I have this theory that when Tiger Woods, in this case Patrick Mahomes, is breathing on the same field as you, that you clutch up that as the opposing quarterback. That stuff just happens that shouldn't happen. Now, granted, to all the Buffalo Bills fans that are mad at me because I haven't brought it up, that clearly was a first down, but we know this stuff often happens in the playoffs where refs go blind. I mean, Des Bryant had a catch that wasn't a catch. So, like, this happens in the playoffs sometimes. You just pray it doesn't happen to your team. But unfortunately for the Bills, they came up short once again to the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's just like I said a couple of weeks ago, like, the Chiefs are a team literally living on a prayer. They're begging you to beat them, and no one else can.
I'm not going to go that far.
Well, look, I'm saying this is my analysis. You see what I see, that they are literally living on a prayer. They are journeying right now. They're living on a prayer, right? There's nothing else there. Like it's Patrick Mahomes and a prayer. That's it. That's all that's keeping this team together. And obviously Chris Jones wrecking the shop because he in the AFC they have bad offensive lines. I'm sorry, AFC fans, but y'all do. Y'all have bad offensive lines that aren't really a challenge for Chris Jones that he can just wreck shop against, right? And so I feel like the Bills, they had it, but they didn't. And Patrick Mahomes is Michael Jordan, and it's hard to beat him if you don't have your same game. And it's just a shame that Josh Allen, well, not really for me, because everybody knows that I like Josh Allen, but I don't think he's as good as most people say, as Danny knows. But, I'm of the mindset that he gave it his all and his team failed him. Danny?
So number one, this is just going to transition directly into the Super Bowl thing just because it's just kind of where we're going with this. I like Josh Allen. I think he's a really good quarterback. I think a lot of people are scrutinizing that last fourth down play in multiple respects, whether Josh Allen didn't switch the protection or Kincaid didn't make the play, which would have been an incredible play that we would have talked about for the next 50 years because that catch would have been incredible. But It's at the end of the day, like the Bills are a really good team. Injuries on their defense screwed them when it mattered most because they were in a situation where, once again, like it's finding the weakness, right? And this is where coaching comes into play. I think McDermott's a good coach too, but Andy Reid is Andy Reid. Andy Reid. Mm-hmm. A lot of people watching this probably know Andy Reid. He was a hell of a coach when he was in Philly, and he's even better in Kansas City because he got the guy. Not to say McNabb wasn't the guy, not to say Mike Vick wasn't the guy, but he's got the guy, right? Everyone's comparing him, Mahomes to Jordan and to Tiger and to whoever. And there's grounds for that.
He's got a guy. That's why I call him the guy.
And here's my thing.
That's why I call him the guy QB. I did it in Syracuse. You know this. I called him the guy, just like there's the God MC with Kendrick Lamar. He's the God QB.
So I'm going to disagree on the living on a prayer thing. And here's why. I think we've been saying that. We said that all last year. year. Oh my God, they don't have Tyreek Hill. What are they going to do in the playoffs to put points up on the board? Oh my God. Wow. This is so hard to watch during the regular season. And yet they did what they had to do and won the whole thing and beat a team in the Super Bowl last year that was definitely more talented than they were and pulled off a crazy comeback because they were better down the stretch, because they were better coached, because they executed better when it mattered most, because they have it. And it is something that you cannot teach. That right there is the only thing you can learn in situations based off of this time that your opportunities that you have in front of you. And Patrick Mahomes, is a guy who executes when it matters. The game could be 10-10 in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes left. If he's got the ball, like even if the Bills score, right, they were still giving the ball back. Like, and it's one of those things where it's like, to me, they are such a well-coached team. They're a well-oiled machine, and it is going to take perfect football. I don't care if they're not as talented. I don't care if, Xavier Worthy, only had, has played well last week, but it was meh. We haven't seen DeAndre Hopkins do anything yet in the playoffs. You're telling me right now that you don't expect D-Hop on that stage to finally show up, which he's waited his entire career for after all those awful quarterbacks he played for? Like, something is going to happen where They're going to execute when it matters most. Travis Kelce, oh my God, Travis Kelce needs to retire. He's on tour with Taylor Swift. He's doing all these different things. His numbers are down. He's about, whatever, blah, blah, blah. He didn't really need to do much in that last game because of how well they were playing with the rest of their offense. The game before that they did, and he balled out against the Texans. And so it's one of those things to me, underestimating them is a problem because they're going to execute, they're going to be there, and game situations matter.
Mm-hmm.
Script matters in terms of playing when it matters most, and coaching matters. I alluded to Spags earlier. Spags is, obviously I love Spags because he was one of the reasons why the Giants beat the undefeated Patriots in Super Bowl 42. Because not only did he have a great defensive line and good defensive backs, great defense anyway, but he called timely plays. He knew how to play chess to get Tom Brady off his game and keep the best offense in the history of the National Football League to 14 points in the most important game of the year. That's the type of thing that he brings to the table. Now, the Eagles clearly showed that they can do that against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. We saw that the last time. Now, and if it wasn't, for a turnover that led to a score, that might have been different. But at the same time, when I look at this, I see a reason for the Eagles to be optimistic. Because like I mentioned earlier, they have the formula. They have the running game, and they can play defense. And those things translate when it matters most. They have a quarterback who you alluded to not being afraid of somebody. He's been there. He outplayed Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, had a phenomenal performance.
I played him last year too.
And he is a really good quarterback, and I'm excited to see what Jalen does on that stage. So I understand that maybe from an Eagles fan perspective that you would not be fearing the Chiefs because of what they look like. It's one of those things where it's like you give someone 2 weeks to prepare and we'll see what happens. I'm not the craziest fan of Nick Sirianni. I think that I don't know what the hell happened in that locker room at the end of last season. I don't know how everything played out. I don't know what he's like. I've never met him. All I know is that if you had to tell me right now who I'm picking to outcoach somebody, it's Andy Reid. If you had to tell me, Vic Fangio's done a phenomenal job, right? And I think that's the whole thing where, like, similar to the Bills, other than Travis Kelce, the Chiefs have a lot of guys, but they don't have the guy, right? So because of that, it's not like you can isolate somebody on their offense and be like, all right, we're going to take him out of the game like a Bill Belichick would do, right? You can't really do that with them because they have all these players that just randomly show up. And I hope everybody enjoys that because you want to talk about telling the future? I will wager a small amount of money only because we're live on multiple platforms right now because I think it's only a matter of time before Tyreek Hill goes back to Kansas City, by the way, because definitely doesn't want to be in Miami. So brace yourself. So if the Eagles are going to do it now, they better do it now because next year it's going to be a whole heck of a lot different when the Chiefs finally add something back to their offense that they haven't had since he left. But to get back to the subject at hand, to me, I think that the Eagles have the formula to win. But to your point that you alluded to earlier about Josh Allen and the Bills, it is hard to pick against the Chiefs. It just is. And we said that about Tom Brady for years. Tom Brady went to those handful of Super Bowls that our teams were a part of and didn't win because they were outplayed that day. Anything can happen on Super Bowl Sunday. And I think the Eagles have the formula and the talent and everything to win. But it's about executing. And it's about doing it when it matters most. And only time will tell. But I'm curious to know your thoughts because I think that there are a lot of things that the Eagles bring to the table that make this a fun matchup. But it's like I said, like they got 15. So we'll see.
I feel like this. I feel like if the Eagles continue to do what they've been doing, which is be balanced and don't make mistakes, I feel like if there's no fumble, there's no nothing. Again, I feel like with the Eagles, if they don't beat themselves, they'll be able to beat them. I think they showed that last year when they beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead, something hard to do. I feel like the Eagles look at games against the Chiefs as revenge games because of the Super Bowl. And I feel like I just said about the Sixers and how they're perfectly constructed to beat Boston. Now they didn't do it today, but they did it against Christmas on Christmas Day. I feel like this Eagles team, like you alluded to, was perfectly constructed based on Howie Roseman being mad about the Super Bowl, perfectly constructed to beat the Chiefs, right? And what's the formula, as you mentioned, right? You got to be able to get Patrick Mahomes on the ground. And now, since you mentioned Nolan Smith, I feel like the Eagles had the perfect opponent. Now, again, I am not saying that Jaden Daniels is anything like 1-5, but he is a perfect allegory to what Patrick Mahomes does, right? Run around, kills you with his legs. The Eagles, I don't know why they're so allergic to spying, but they are. And they won't be blitzing. Vic Fangio's not going to blitz, but I feel like there's going to be an over reliance of saying Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, stay in perfect pursuit. Don't give him no holes. Let him try and throw the ball to Travis Kelce or Xavier Worthy. But I feel like you said, they got a bunch of guys. They have a guy tight end. But I just feel like the Eagles, you've got Quinyanamo Bay. You didn't even mention Quinyan. Quinyanamo Bay, the person who is the defensive rookie of the year, who's going to take away Xavier Worthy. And once Xavier Worthy or DeAndre Hopkins, whoever he decides he's taking away, he's going to take away. And once I feel like they're forced to rely on Xavier Worthy, because I don't feel like and I feel like as long as the Eagles don't beat themselves, as long as Quinyanamo and the secondary keep their hands to themselves, as long as there's no defensive holding, as long as there's no beating yourself, right? I feel like the Eagles will win, because I just feel like last time they had a secondary. They don't have a secondary, right? All they have on defense is Chris Jones. And that doesn't scare
I
me
disagree
when
with
I've
that,
got
actually, but
all right, defensive line. All they have on their defensive line is Chris Jones, the kid from Purdue, who I
McDuffie?
know you're going to mention, huh? I'm talking about the
McDuffie?
defensive line. I'm talking about the defensive line.
Well, I'm talking about McDuffie on the back end. Like you're pretending like McDuffie doesn't exist, and he's a pretty freaking good corner. Of course, they had to trade one of their corners this past offseason because they didn't want to resign him. But
he's a good corner, but he's not their best corner. Their best corner
that's the whole thing.
plays
But
in
like,
Tennessee.
but that's the whole thing, though, right? Like to me, this is about
they're shut.
the Eagles.
I'll put it like this:
Yeah,
their shutdown corner plays in Tennessee. They're okay corner.
This whole thing, right?
So I felt. Go ahead.
The Eagles can't get themselves out of their own game plan. And luckily for them, the Chiefs, except for last week, had proven, or this past game, had proven that they're really not the same explosive offense, right? So they're not going to blow you out of games. They're not going to do whatever. So if the Eagles continue to run the ball and don't abandon the run game and allow Saquon to do what Saquon does, even if he's getting 2-3 yard runs, stick with it, because unless the Chiefs start pulling away, which we have only seen once this year, really, there's no reason to think that the Eagles can't play their game. Because if the Eagles are in a position to feel like they want to force throws to whatever, because they want to catch people off guard, or they think they need to change how they play to play against the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes and whatever else, that's when they're going to screw up and they're going to fall on their face. Because it's like, do what got you there.
Mm-hmm.
Do what got you there. Give the ball to Saquon, and I think you'll be fine. But at the same time, if you think that Spags doesn't know that stuff's coming, like, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic from that standpoint, because, like I said, they have the recipe, but will they execute when it matters? So,
well, I mean, like you said, you give Spags got 2 weeks, Vic got 2 weeks. I feel like if Vic got 2 weeks, he gonna outplan, because I feel like this, right? The record is interesting, right? Those people who say he's 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes. Now let's just be real, right? Other than in Miami, it wasn't like that Denver defense had anything other than Patrick Surtain for Denver. Like in Denver, he didn't have that talent that he has in Philly, as you said. The only close thing was Miami, but those people were old. So, like, I'm of the mindset that you give Vic Fangio 2 weeks to game plan for this Kansas City offense that, as you mentioned, is not dominant as it used to be, right? I feel like the only problem for the Eagles is they don't have Nakobe Dean, so they don't really have anybody who can cover the tight end. And I mean, you put Travis Kelce against Oren Burks and what's left of the Eagles middle linebackers, I'll give that matchup to Travis Kelce. So I'll be real with you. But I think that you got Cooper DeJean who can tackle. I've yet to see Cooper DeJean make a bad tackle. So I feel like Cooper DeJean is going to end up on Travis Kelce a lot. And I saw Cooper DeJean tackle an untackable running back in Baltimore. So I feel like if I feel like the Eagles have enough people who are above, they have young guys that don't know any better and are just waiting to make their names off of Patrick Mahomes. And I feel like this is a bad formula for specifically the Patrick Mahomes who currently leads the league in turnovers. Now he hasn't done it in the playoffs yet because he had to see the dominant defense like this, right? He's played Houston, okay defense. Played Buffalo.
They have a top half defense. The Texans have a good defense. That's the Texans have a good defense.
They were injured
the Bills, though. The Bills have a good defense, and they were also nicked up a little bit for sure. But with Milano back there, and like they got some guys. So and here's my thing. I think it is fair to say that the Eagles' defense, which is one of the main reasons they're there, it's them and Saquon, quite frankly. But it is they're in a position to do something, right? And I just wonder if so far we haven't seen the lights being too bright from them. I think they have a lot of veterans in that locker room that are, smart enough and who were in that last Super Bowl. Especially Jalen. Like I don't think Jalen's going to blink. I think that's one of the big things that I don't think is being talked about enough is that like I mentioned earlier, I don't think Jalen's going to blink. I think he's going to be just fine in this game, and we'll see what happens from that in that department. But I don't think either. To me, I just don't want to because my whole thing is that like we always underestimate the Chiefs. We always talk about how they're not this, they're not that, they're not that great, whatever else. And then they only lost one game this year. Really lost one game this year.
They're the defending champs. They are who we say they are. I've said they got the guy QB. Like, I'll put Patrick, like, the only player who I've seen dominate Patrick Mahomes, there's only two of them, right? One is in Cincinnati, and he's got no chance at a playoff. The other one is in Philadelphia, and he's lost once to him in a game in the Super Bowl and then beat him last year. So I'm of the mindset that every time I see Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts on the same field, Jalen Hurts is outplayed. Like
there's only one active QB that's beaten Mahomes in the playoffs, and it's Burrow. Nobody else has beaten him because his other two, because he's like 17-3 or something in his playoff career, and the other two losses are to Brady. So it's like,
well, that's why I've said I think for the Eagles, right? They have Brandon Graham's back for the most part. They have experience ending dynasties. So I feel like again, this is what I'm relying on, right? They don't lose rematch Super Bowls as New England.
Dynasties?
You're in the area. You're in the area. They don't lose rematch Super Bowls. I feel like this game is going to be really close.
It happened once. Let's it's a very small sample size. Listen,
once is enough.
I'll give it to Nick Foles all day long. Don't get me wrong, but that's a very small sample size to say that they end dynasties.
And I've seen Jalen Hurts outduel Patrick Mahomes twice in my life. So now he lost once, and then he beat him last year. So, and Jalen Hurts, to his credit, has a good record against the AFC. Besides when he sees Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. So I'm of the mindset that this is a revenge game. I feel like the Eagles are looking for revenge, and I feel like they're going to get it. Now, will it be a close game? Will they have to rely on Jake Elliott and how, unpredictable he's been this year? I still feel like I have confidence in Jake Elliott. And I feel like it's indoors. It's not, as long as that field is not as bad as it was the last time they saw each other, I feel like if it's a neutral field, it's good grass, the Eagles will beat the Chiefs.
Well, it's it's in New Orleans, so it'll be in the Dome. So they'll be fine.
Well, notice what I said. If it's good grass.
Well, yeah. I mean, to me, it's like I said, I'm excited because I really think it is similar to all the Chiefs Super Bowls. To be honest, I think that's one of the things. Like, there's like Chiefs fatigue, and there's so many people that are just tired of them and whatever. Like, I don't feel the same way about them that I felt about the Patriots. I don't think it's the same thing. I think, obviously Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce being Travis Kelce, and who he's dating invites a whole nother level of stuff to this. But I also feel like I like Andy Reid. Like, I'm happy he's not with Philly anymore because I always thought that he was a good coach and he seemed like a good guy. And now he's on another team where he has complete like. You want something crazy? It's like I want to look this up. Like how many years? Because it's close to where he's almost been the same. He's almost been in Kansas City the same amount of time that he was in Philly. It might be the same now. It's something like that. Where like once again, it's crazy how time flies. But it's stuff like that, right? Like I like Andy Reid, I like Spags. I don't have a problem with Mahomes. I'm not crazy about how he gets officiated, but at the same time, like it's gonna happen. The same thing happened to Tom Brady, right? The same thing happened with Peyton Manning. It was the same thing. So to me, I have respect for Travis Kelce because I like tight ends. I miss,
Mhm.
when the
We
Giants had a
both
good tight end. But
we
it,
both we
it, it
both are in
was,
agreement with our respect to the tight ends. I feel like it's going to be a good game. I don't know if it
I
ends
do
up
too.
going to overtime. I don't think so. I think I here's what I think, right? I think the Jalen Carter and Jalen Hurts, both impose their wills on the Chiefs, and that is the difference. You might even get a Jordan Davis sack. I don't know. But I think the Georgia Bulldogs, the Alabama Crimson Tide, and the Oklahoma Sooner get the victory this time. I'm not saying this ends the Chiefs dynasty. I'm not even worried about an old Tyreek Hill coming to Kansas City. But like I'm of the mindset that, I feel like the Eagles are that team that, I'm not even saying this because I'm biased, because as you know, when I do this show and I do anything broadcast, I take the Eagles fan hat off. Objectively, right? The only three things that the Chiefs have working for them is coaching, because obviously most people are going to pick Andy Reid over Nick Sirianni, the QB, Patrick Mahomes, and the tight end. That's it. Like, you want to be objective about this, right? Like, the Eagles have the shutdown corner. The Eagles have the best nickel corner. Like, the Eagles have the best defensive line. The Eagles have, like, when you look at the Chiefs, right? This is why I say they're a team begging to be defeated, right? You have Chris Jones. You have obviously Patrick Mahomes being the youngest of these two. You have Chris Jones. You have Travis Kelce. And obviously they know how to win. They've been here before. They've seen it all. But I just think that they are a team that is begging for a team to knock them off. And I think that team is the Eagles. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan, but I cover this team. And I also feel like it is just, it's setting up. It's just like 17-18. It's going to be a tough game. A lot of Eagles fans may not have hair at the end of this game. They might start with hair and might lose it to the end. But I feel like something's going to happen, because it always happens. Something's going to happen. There's going to be a turnover one way or the other. There's going to be a turnover, fumble, interception, whatever. And the Eagles will win this game. Might be by field goal, might be by 10 points. It's not going to be more than 10 points, right? The Chiefs win one-score games. The Eagles have a very, very good record in one-score games. This won't be more than 10, 12 points. That's going to be the Super Bowl. It's not going to overtime. It's going to be a fourth quarter slogging. I feel like the Eagles, if they're up 10, I feel like whatever team is up at halftime, by the time Kendrick Lamar steps on the field, will only be up by 8 to 10 points. And the game
If that.
starts, if that, right? I feel like the most it'll be is 8 to 10 points. I don't think you see a blowout in this game. Now, I've been wrong
That's still a
before,
lot, though.
and maybe the Eagles, maybe they do what they did to the Commanders. I don't see it against the guy
No.
QB, but I would love to be wrong and love to see them destroy the Chiefs by 30 points. But I just don't
And,
see
and,
that in the Super Bowl.
and I'm saying, I think that the
That's
Chiefs defense is better than I think a lot of people give them credit for. And I think,
but that's not saying much. It's the
like,
same defense that Jalen Hurts ran for 600 total yards on. It's not really saying. That's not saying much.
well, I mean, here's the thing, right? It's you don't need. It's interesting, right? Because like the approach to a running game right now, right? Where like obviously Saquon and Derrick Henry and whoever else, Josh Jacobs, they've done a great job of like really breathing life back into it. But it's all about like running well at the right time. And I think, and like being able to run in short yardage situations and being able to convert third downs and fourth downs and being efficient. Now, when you have someone like Saquon who can break stuff off and go crazy, like that's a big part of it. And that takes your whole game to another level. But with defense, like with the way the Chiefs play, and even the different, I mean, the Chiefs have a good defense, and I think they're, it's funny because I'm really trying not to sit here and be like I'll see it when I see it, but
No, that's your right. I mean, like I said,
I think the Eagles, like I said, I think I would not surprise me if the Eagles won. It wouldn't. I wouldn't be happy about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they won. I think that they are good enough to win. They have the recipe to win. They're built that way. But it's like I said, like there are a lot of teams, like the 49ers, man. The 49ers had that in the palm of their hand and they
no,
fumbled.
they weren't
And
mentally.
and and
You
it's
know
one of those
I
things.
said
I'll take it a step further. What do you call it? Because they beat the 49ers twice, right?
yeah.
Yes, they beat the 49ers twice because their first Super Bowl was the win against the 49ers. So it's like, it's one of those things, like the 49ers have always been built with this incredible roster. They've always been more talented. Like in most of the Super Bowls that the Chiefs have played in, they have not been the more talented team. They haven't been. And I think that that's the interesting thing about it too, is that like you think about the flashy weapons, you think about, once again, Mahomes, Kelsey, Hill, Jones, like you think of like the big names, but they weren't more talented than the 49ers either time that they played them. They weren't more talented than the Bucks, and that's why the Bucks with Brady won and mopped the floor with them in that Super Bowl. There's no, to me, when push comes to shove, like they do what they need to do to win, and
This was
it's and that's what's interesting to me about them, is that they do have the quote unquote heart of a champion, and only time will tell. But I probably would pick
here's
the Chiefs by like 3 because I don't see. I think they have a chance to do something that's never been done, and I think that that's something that is enough motivation and can give you a chip. That is because the Patriots had a chance and they failed. They're the only team that has ever repeated that made it back to the Super Bowl. So they're the only team that has an opportunity to do this of all the teams that have gone back to back. And
Mhm.
you know, I just I see it. Like I can see them walking off and doing this unbelievable three-peat type deal. And because that's just what happens with dynasties. And at the same time, like the Eagles are good enough to beat them. That's how they're built. And only time will tell, man. But to your point, it's gonna be a fun chess match all the way around.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say, right? About those 49ers, especially last year's 49ers team. Because I've said this into your face and everybody else's face. Like I've said this about that 49ers team, that they are talented but mentally weak. And that's what happened in the Super Bowl, right? Like let's just be objective here. Other than their defense, they weren't more talented than the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs had the better quarterback, the Chiefs had the better running back. The Chiefs had other, I mean, you might give it to McCaffrey. They had the 49ers had the better running back. Tight end was Travis Kelsey, but like they had the coaching advantage. Like I knew the 49ers, because I was saying this at a Super Bowl party when this was happening last year. I knew when the 49ers went down there, they had their little celebration because they were up by like double digits, and the Chiefs just killed that momentum in the second quarter. I knew before overtime even happened that the Chiefs, because the 49ers are front runners. Like I said this last year, they should have lost to the Lions, but the Lions were just as mentally weak as the 49ers, right? So the 49ers at that point, not this year's version, because this year's version just was a shell of itself. But last year's version, I feel like I was one of the few people, because because I've texted you about it, that I was saying the 49ers are front runners. People were saying, oh, you're just having sour grapes because they whooped the Eagles, which was fine. But I know mentally weak teams when I see them. And that was the 49ers. I know mentally weak front running teams when I see them. So, I'm of the mindset that here you have two mentally sound teams. Something's got to give. And I feel like as long as the Eagles don't make mistakes, as long as they don't get, as long as they start hearing footsteps because Travis Kelsey and Patrick Mahomes on the other field, like you said, the Eagles do what they keep the main thing, right? If the Eagles do what they do, if they have balance, if they finally use that screen game to tire out Chris Jones, which I have been begging them to freaking do, because how are you an Andy Reid disciple and you don't use the screen game? It's unheard of. It's unheard of. And you know that because what were Eagles teams really good at under Andy Reid and under Doug Peterson, and they're not so good at under Nick Sirianni? What was the main thing that the Eagles were known for? That freaking
I
screen
still
game.
have nightmares about Brian Westbrook, by the way. That man's a
I
baller.
know. I know. But like I'm of the mindset that if the Eagles just do what they do, right? If they just use, I'm not even saying they got to use it. They got to use Saquon in the screen game. Like they found something with using Dallas Goedert in the screen game. They found something with these people were using Dallas Goedert in a jet sweep. I've never seen that all season, right? So like I'm of the mindset that if they do that, if Kellen Moore is going to open up the playbook and we'll get to this, before he runs to the Saints or decides that job is horrible and he shouldn't take it. I hope he decides that job is horrible and he shouldn't take it. But if he doesn't, right, open the playbook. Don't be like the defensive coordinator who's down in Arizona. Stay focused, and I feel like they can beat them. I don't know what the score going for you next week.
And I just want to say this too. Like, the last thing I got to say for now about this, because you just mentioned Kellen Moore. I'll be honest. I don't think it's that hard to be the Eagles offensive coordinator right now. I really don't. Like, I talked about how talented their offense is. I talked about how good their offensive line is. And I talked about Saquon Barkley. Like, hand the ball to 26. It's not rocket science. Like, I'm sorry, it's not. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that Kellen Moore is going to coach. Like, Kellen Moore is not going to coach the Eagles to a Super Bowl. That's not happening because he's not that guy. And I also think he's a little bit overrated as a assistant anyway. But I do think that when push comes to shove, like, it's game script, right? It's like I was saying earlier. If the Eagles can be in a situation where they can afford to run the ball and not feel like they have to be something that they're not, then they'll be fine. And they'll continue to move the needle. And then the play action game will get going. And then Hurts is going to be fine because Hurts can start using his legs to also supplement his passing game. And then that's what makes him dangerous. And honestly, something we haven't talked about yet, which I ought to say is I do kind of have to go in a minute, but the one thing that the Chiefs have to do is keep the Eagles out of short yardage situations. They have to, because if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, it's going to be two conversations. It's going to be, wow, Saquon Barkley was phenomenal, Super Bowl MVP, yada, yada, yada. And then it's going to be the tush push. Those are going to be the two things. And, because right now, like, Josh Allen tried it. And Josh Allen is the biggest physical quarterback in the league. And he got stuffed. And somehow the Eagles, because of how good their offensive line is, and because Jalen, can squat like 700 pounds, whatever the hell it is, and he got Saquon Barkley pushing him behind, like, it makes sense. So to me, like, those are some of the keys, right? It's situational football, limiting the tush push if you're the Chiefs, and then continuing to play your game. And I think that's going to be interesting to see, because I think the Chiefs can wear many hats. They just haven't necessarily had to or felt like they've needed to. And, because you mentioned the running game, like, Kareem Hunt has been playing well. And so, Isaiah Pacheco came back from injury, and he has had his moments too. So maybe you see them do that a little bit more, which I think would be interesting too, because similar thing, right? Like, if they can find a way to establish the run a little bit against the Eagles, which is hard because they're front. But if you do that, then maybe that'll open up some other stuff downfield. So it is a really interesting chess match, and I'm excited to see how this goes because, like I said, I could see either team winning it. I think it's one of the better matchups we've had in a while, just from a scheme standpoint and from how they approach the game. But it's going to be a good one, to say the least.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I know you got to go, so I don't know what more we're going to hit before you go. Well, let's hit this one because we talk basketball, so we might as well hit the All-Star snubs. Your All-Star snubs. I obviously know Kyrie. You know one of mine is Tyrese Maxey. What are your other ones?
The big one's Trae Young, right?
Yeah.
I think Trae, as someone who lived near Atlanta, I called a lot of Hawks highlights, and I think that Trae is as talented as it gets. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the thing that screwed him, and they talked about this on Inside the NBA, the big thing that screwed him this year was that his turnover ratio to assist ratio sucks. And then like, a lot of that is also because they're kind of doing the whole James Harden thing with him right now, where they're really putting everything on him and using him as the engine. And because the ball's in his hand nonstop, like he's going to have more turnovers. So despite him, leading the league in assists and also still being Trae Young and can shoot the ball from the parking lot, like it's an issue that it's hard. Like, but the whole thing is like I don't know who you take off. Like, and that's why like it's hard because I don't know if there are any crazy snubs. Like I think Trae Young is a really good player that most years would deserve to be an All-Star. You know what it kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of all those years in the West where there were so many great point guards that were just not because like Damian Lillard doesn't have nearly like the fact that Kyle Lowry still has more All-Star appearances than Damian Lillard is still wild. And Kyle Lowry's a
Yeah.
good player, former Sixer, Villanova Wildcat, all that. But the fact that he was in a situation where because he was in the East and there were more point guards out west that he could keep making the All-Star game every year and players like Dame, who was one of the more talented point guards we've seen in recent memory, like I it's hard for Trae, and LaMelo is interesting too, but at the same time, I don't know. It's also a team thing, right? It's like that's why like All-Star we're gonna do a separate thing on the All-Star thing, not tonight, but because that's a whole can of worms that we could talk about for hours. But it is the whole thing about fan voting is that fans want to see certain people there. I remember there was a year where Zaza Pachulia was leading All-Star voting, and that was an insane thing. And it takes opportunities away from players that are having great seasons that should be on the All-Star team. And I don't necessarily think we have that this year, but I've always been above around it where it's like you have the all stars are selected by the coaches, by reporters, by whatever, by the media, by the powers that be, and then the fans select the starting five. That way,
Right.
you have the players that deserve to be there, and then the starting five is selected by the fans. So to me, like, I think that's the way it should be done. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really have too many because I just think that like there were new players that burst on the scene. Like Tyler Harrow balled out this year. He was one of the last selections. And he deserved to be on because his numbers are crazy. Jalen Brunson. I kind of alluded to earlier, like this is the first time in like 50 years, or might be ever. I don't know if the Knicks. I'm talking about like back in the Clydesdale Frazier, Willis Reed days. Like I don't even know if they started on the All Star team together. So it's like this might be the first time that the Knicks have two starters in the All Star game, which is wild.
Mm-hmm.
So it's stuff like that, right? Like I'm pretty set, honestly. I don't really have
Yeah.
any crazy ones.
I feel like Tyrese Maxey just because he is that guy.
I mean, yeah,
I feel
Maxi's numbers are good.
Yeah, I feel like he's that guy. Obviously, I know the record right now because he was pressing and he didn't start out the season the way he should have because he didn't have Joel Embiid and Paul George there to take the scoring pressure off so he could have the easier shots and his numbers would be even more crazier than they are. I feel like obviously Tyrese Maxey, Tyler Hero's great, but I feel like you can take him off. For him, I feel like LaMelo Ball because LaMelo Ball was balling too. I obviously know that the Charlotte Hornets are not good at all, but that's not his fault. That's more roster construction than him. You mentioned Trae. I mean, I don't need to do Trae Young. I feel like there's others too, but those are my main two on the East side. And like you said, it's just because now that Damian Lillard's there and all these other guards, Jalen Brunson's ascending, that it's kind of hard now if you're Tyrese Maxey, if the
Yeah.
record isn't good as it is. And for LaMelo Ball, because they're both, I feel like, have better star power than Tyler Hero, even than Jalen Brunson. But, Jalen Brunson benefits from being in the biggest media market and having Stephen A. Smith and him and other people as his biggest boosters. And so does Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns most definitely deserves to be there. He's been having a great season. He is gelled with the Knicks. We'll see what that looks like in the playoffs, but right now in the regular season, it looks pretty good. And that's my all-star selection, Snubs. And just because I won't be able to get an article done because of how late it is, I need to get this off my chest. The Celtics beat the Sixers while we were doing this. The Sixers were destroying them, and then they finally came back down to earth and got outscored 18-1 or whatever. There was 38-1 in the fourth quarter, and ergo they lost that game. So now the Celtics and Sixers are 1-1. The Celtics obviously are a good team, outside of that Christmas Day game. But I feel like I said, it's like I said about the Eagles. The Sixers are perfectly constructed to beat the Celtics. I feel like Daryl Morey constructed this team specifically to beat the Celtics and to beat the Knicks. And this is why the Sixers play so well. Took the Knicks to overtime just a few weeks ago and almost beat the Celtics tonight, but lost because they didn't have Joel Embiid or Paul George. So I feel like the Celtics are a really good team. I'm not going to take that away from them. I don't know if they're the best team with the Cleveland Cavaliers obviously being number one and obviously overachieving. I feel like the Celtics will probably end up in the Eastern Conference Finals, probably facing some combination of, because I think the Bucks are relevant, some combination of the Sixers, Cavs, or the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. But I feel like the Celtics are, I said it earlier, the Celtics are a weaker team this year. I don't know what it is, but they just are. I saw it today throughout the game. Like, they weren't hitting their shots. We say this same thing. Danny might get me for saying that. But I feel like the Celtics are good enough. They hit their shots. But against teams that play them tougher, they really don't. And so I feel like they rely on their talent, and talent only gets you but so far. And obviously when you have Jalen and Jason, the Killer Jays, like, it's going to get you where you need to be. But I honestly feel like it's more their talent than their coach. I feel like Joe Mazzulla gets them in trouble because I feel like he's got a ring, and so he's obviously more qualified to coach than me. But I feel like they win in spite of their coach more than they win because of him. So I feel like the Celtics are a good team. They'll probably wind up in the Eastern Conference Finals once again, but I feel like they'll get taken down by some combination of the Sixers, Cavaliers, Knicks somehow. I mean, if it's the Knicks, I'm obviously saying go Celtics. But because I'm sporting those three things, Danny knows I'll never be pro New York ever. But so, like, I'm of that. That's my mindset. But the Knicks are the Celtics are obviously a really good team. They're number 2 in the East with the Knicks breathing down their neck, obviously at 3. I don't know what happened against the Lakers last night for y'all, but the Celtics are really good, and the Sixers are, it should worry you. It should worry a lot of people that the Sixers are finally playing tougher, and what it looks like. Rumor has it that Joel Embiid and Paul George will be incoming this week. So I would be worried if you have to play the Sixers in the second half. I'll just leave it at that, Danny.
And to put a bow on it, because here's my thing. I think the Sixers have talent. There's a lot of hullabaloo in the offseason. Are they going to be healthy? I'll put in the same conversation as the Mavs. Like, are they going to be healthy? Because if they're healthy, then we can have a conversation. But if Joel Embiid is going to be doing God knows what and out doing random things and not being, reverting back to his early days with the Sixers where he took 2 seasons off before actually playing a game, and then diving into everything else. If Paul George can play well, like, I don't want to hear anything about playoff P until we get to the NBA Finals, because he still has not gotten to the NBA Finals. So I don't want to hear anything about playoff P. But
you're a believer in playoff. You're a believer in playoff.
Oh, absolutely
Jimmy,
not.
That has amounted to nothing.
No. Jimmy Butler brought them to the finals twice. So I'm not. That is way more than Paul George. Like, listen, this is a fun conversation because is Paul George
lost both times? Like, I'm not even, because you know how I feel about the Jimmy Butler hype. Like, I feel like he was good, but he wasn't good enough as a Sixer. He got them to a finals, but lost both of them. So, like, how I feel about people.
Yeah, because they lost to better teams. That's the reality of it. Like, it's the same thing.
They lost to better teams, but this is my argument, right? Jimmy Butler, I said it earlier, he is a star player, but he is a glorified role player that does not get you to win a championship. I said this to you in 2019. George. I'm not even making the Paul George argument. I'm just talking about Jimmy Butler as a whole.
And you're gonna hate me for saying this, but so does Joel Embiid, dog. Like, Joel hasn't done anything. I'm sorry, he's done nothing. He's done nothing. I didn't say he was a role player. I'm saying he hasn't done anything. So I'm not gonna sit here and, like, pound the table and say that Joel Embiid is this player that can be, transcend my team and lead me to a championship, because he hasn't done it. And like, maybe who the hell knows if that shot from Kawhi doesn't go in? Who knows? But at the end of the day, like, he's
Well,
not.
he gave you Knicks. He
He's
gave
not
you
moving
Knicks
the needle.
30.
He's
He
not.
gave you Knicks 30. He gave you Knicks 35. Had
That's
y'all
fine.
worrying on one knee and Bell's palsy. Had he been healthy, y'all wouldn't have gone that far. You know that. You know that.
That's fine. I mean, I can say the same thing. We can say that every year about Joel Dog. We can say every year about Joel Embiid. That's the problem. And I think
No, we don't.
we don't say that about Joel
this.
Embiid every year.
Hold
on.
Objectively, you know this.
What happened with that entire, like, once again, the process is dead. Let's be very clear about that, right? Now I'm going on a rant, because now you got me riled up. I probably need to leave, but I'm going to do this now because I need to do this. So, one, Joel Embiid is a phenomenal player. When he's on the floor, he is fantastic. He's one of the best big men in the league. He's a fantastic player, yada, yada, yada. The attitude annoys the hell out of me. And I'm sorry. I know that, he's probably one of those guys who you love having him on your team because he annoys the hell out of other people, and he's a really good player when he wants to be. But there are a lot of times where he is clearly not in the game, or otherwise he's not healthy. And that is a major issue. Whether it was the lung thing that one year where he clearly wasn't himself but was still fighting, and then the rest of the team failed him because they just weren't built the right way that year, whatever the heck that was. Otherwise, like, you haven't – Joel Embiid, have they been to a conference finals?
Not yet.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's the same thing. It's like Paul George is also a very good player. Get there. Because until you do, I don't care. Like, I'll be very honest. Like, they're not a top 3 team in the East.
Uh-oh.
And unless they're better than the Celtics, Cavs, or Knicks?
I mean, they just beat the Celtics on Christmas Day healthy. They just beat the Celtics on Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day in the NBA. It doesn't matter. It's an 82-game season.
It does.
It's like saying if the Yankees go beat the Dodgers in some random game in May, that they're going to meet up in October and it's going to be the same. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
Here's what I'll say, right? Here's what I'll say about that, right? They are, when healthy, they are a top 4 team in the East. Look, they're better than the Cavs, like, healthy. I'll give you that they have to. They are better than the Cavs. Look, man, there is no they're more talented.
The Cavs are younger and they're faster and they are much better at shooting threes. That's the way the NBA is going.
I just saw the Cavaliers, like, lose to the Magic. Come on now, last year. Like, let's just be honest.
They dropped 91 in the first half against the Mavs tonight. 91 points and a half, dog.
Look, man. Look, I'm of the mindset that they're better than the Cavs when healthy, and you'll see it in the playoffs if they play them. They are better than the Bucks when healthy. I'll give you the Celtics, and I think they're better. You already know I think they're better than the Knicks. So even though it hasn't, proof the concept hasn't happened because they haven't been healthy yet. So, like, I'm of the mindset, right, that when push comes to shove, when they get healthy, right, that they'll be top 4, top 5 teams. We'll have this discussion again on this podcast, and we'll see. Like, we will see in the playoffs.
Only time will tell, man.
Look,
time. I'm not saying it can't happen. Like, I'm not trying to be that guy and be like, nah, this can't happen. But I'm also sitting here saying, like, once again, show me. Like, the Sixers have not done that. They haven't. And it's the same. Joel Embiid has not done that. Paul George has not done that. I like Maxey. I think Maxey's a really good player. And quite frankly, someone who they should build the franchise around. I'm being very honest about that. Because if they don't win, what do? That's a real question.
When you don't want, this is what you do. You go get more role
the whole thing. Because trusting the process hasn't worked, dog. I'm telling you, it's only a matter of time before Joel Embiid is no longer in Philly.
Everybody keeps saying that, and then I see Luka Doncic get traded.
Which once again proves the point. Yeah,
y'all
Luka
that does not prove the point. It's just a stupid GM.
Conference and won and got to the finals. Joel Embiid has not done that.
And they only won 2 games, and they only got 2 games against the Celtics.
Because the Celtics are the best team in the NBA, and they're still the best team in the NBA until someone proves otherwise. I don't care what the Celtics do right now, because there's nobody in the East right now, as much as I would like to say about the Knicks, there's no one in the East right now that is beating them in a 7-game series. No one.
Okay. I'll give you that because it has yet to be proven. But here's what I'll say. Right, the Celtics are a really good team. I'll give you that. Right, but I'm just sorry about you talking about the top three teams in the East. I won't give you the Celtics. Fine, you don't want to give me the Celtics. That's all good. I told you the Sixers are specifically constructed to beat the Celtics, and that'll happen soon. You'll wait and see in the playoffs. All right, so that's gonna happen. I already told you that they're better than the Cavs. I have no problem saying that. I have no problem saying that they're better than the Knicks because when push comes to shove, if they're healthy, they will show that. But that's every team, right? I've seen Jalen Brunson
It's
get
possible.
destroyed by a less top. But look, I'll give you that, right? Here's what I'll say though. You like the Knicks. I know that. I know you do. You like the Knicks. You are confident this is the best Knicks team of your lifetime right now. I get that.
And no,
I get that.
it is. I'm
I
not.
get
That's not thinking that it is. I remember those Allen Houston teams. I remember when Jamal Crawford and Zach Randolph and David Lee and when Melo went there. We love Melo, right? I remember when Melo was there and how good they were in 2013, and they lost to the Pacers because Roy Hibbert was a problem for them to deal with, right? And Paul George was a problem for them to deal with. I remember that, but it's not even about that. It's the same thing, right? It's the Knicks. The difference between the Knicks and the Sixers right now is that the Knicks are actually proving that they can put up offensive numbers consistently and play defense when they need to. Now, once again, it's the middle of the NBA season before the All-Star break, so nothing really matters in terms of how the people are playing. It'll matter down the stretch, but it's. I think that both of them are built to compete with the Celtics, similar to what we just talked about with the Chiefs. Show me, execute, do what you have to do. Because when the Celtics are playing Celtic basketball and they're healthy, with the way they're built right now,
But man, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. We'll see. In the meantime, while we've been discussing basketball and football, Jimmy Butler apparently is not going to sign a contract, so he just nixed the trade to the Warriors. So this is a great way to get to my segment, unless you got a shout out or you want to talk about any of these other things. You got anything to say on this before we get there, just to get the WNBA fans something? Caitlin Clark Snubs, the All-Star three-point competition, big deal or not? I don't think it's a big deal because the WNBA All-Star game is in Indianapolis this year. And that's where she wants to debut her three-point competition, and that's her right. I'm not Colin Cowler. I don't think this says anything more than Caitlin Clark wants to do it in her home market, which makes sense to me. Great job to her, but I think that I would like to see her go against Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Damian Lillard or whoever was going to do that 3-point contest this year. I would love to see that, but she doesn't want to do it right now, and she'll do it maybe next year. So I don't think this is a big deal.
I don't either. I think that the WNBA is growing to the point where, she should be in a situation where she can actually do stuff for the WNBA All-Star game and take that to a whole nother level. So I don't think she needs it, and I don't think the WNBA needs it, honestly. I mean, I think it'd be great if they, Sabrina went out again. I love that when she went head to head with Steph. I thought that was dope. But I also I'm not going to heartbroken that Caitlin Clark's not going to be there. I think she's going to be just fine doing what she's doing. I think the WNBA is going to be just fine doing what they're doing, especially because by the time that they start up again, they'll have Paige Beckers will be in the league probably, and a few other powerful players from college as well. So until Juju comes in a couple years from now.
Morgan's rooting for them to get for the Washington I was about to say Washington Mavericks, Washington Mystics to take her. We'll see if that happens, Paige.
But I'm excited.
Yeah, me as well. So we'll do the shout out segment. I don't have shouts out to Philadelphia. Shouts out to obviously the first responders. Let me just say this: first responders in DC and Philadelphia who got to work, went and did what they could, and tried to make a horrible situation, less horrible. So shouts out to them. Obviously, while everybody else is running away from danger, they're going there, they're going into it. So, these plane crashes obviously were horrible, but they could have been worse, especially because you could have had impact. That's what happened in Philly to people on the ground. Obviously, a little less so in DC because they crashed and both things went into the Potomac. So shouts out to them. Even though It is what it is. We try not to get political, but we all know who's in the White House and how this could go. This could go either way. But shouts out to the people who do this job, despite what your political party is, and go into danger and try and minimize lives lost. So shouts out to the first responders in Washington D.C. and in Philadelphia, and also obviously in Los Angeles as well, in the Los Angeles area and the SoCal area, fighting these fires as they continue to sprout up and dealing with drought conditions, obviously over there and everything else. So that's my shout out. I don't know if you have one, Danny.
Yeah, no, I was gonna hit because we hit the two ones from the plane crashes, just LA as well. I think it was until yesterday where I think yesterday was the first day in like a long time that there were not fires burning. So hope everybody's doing all right out there and everything along those lines. And yeah, man, no, well, shout out to you for asking me to come on today. This was great. Hopefully we'll get to link up again sometime soon. And once again, it worked out with the scheduling wise, which was perfect. So, and obviously we had a lot of really good stuff to be able to talk about today. So thank you, good sir. And I'm excited about we got a lot of good stuff coming up.
Thank you. But for the road, you want to
find the Wi-Fi network.
I don't know.
Check the modem or router connection.
My Google wants to make a guest appearance. But I've got a he's not him, she's not her, and they aren't them. I don't know. Do you have one? Do you have any? I know you watch the show, so we gotta you can have a he is him, she is her if you got one, because I know you want to shout out any of your local stories or something. I don't know if you got any he's not him, she's not her, and they aren't them, or if you got that they are them. I don't know. Do you have one?
Yeah, I'll just say this. Like I was fortunate to be able to cover the Georgia Bulldogs win the national championship and then win the Orange Bowl and everything else when I was down there in Augusta. And having a chance to cover UConn was really fun because the vibe and the attention that goes to not only college basketball but specifically women's college basketball is a big deal. And UConn's been on that for years. Yesterday, actually, so Gino Ariema, so Gino, he was speaking. For those who don't know, Gino is the all-time winningest coach in the history of college basketball, men or women. He has like an 83, it's like an 8.33 or 8.34 winning percentage for his entire career, which is absolutely absurd. And
the Norristown, PA.
Yeah, it is a. So we went. He had media availability yesterday before their game today against Butler, which they won their 11th straight. And you go into that building, the Worth building on their campus, which is where they have their men's and basketball facilities. And going in there is like a museum. I'm going to post some stuff on my social tomorrow because I posted a little bit, but like I went into like the men's and women's side of things where they have like the all like the not murals, but the different really cool like glass statues. No, yeah, obviously the trophies, right? Because they have a boatload of national championships. The men have 6 and the women have 11. So it's they have all the gold balls in there, and it's insane. Or not gold ball, all the crystal balls in there, and it's insane and awesome stuff. It's like walking into a museum, which is like so cool because there's so much history to it. Everybody from Diana Taurasi, who's the GOAT, to Sue Bird and Maya Moore, who ended her WNBA career short when she's UConn's all-time leading scorer, and was incredible during her time in UConn and with Minnesota and everything else. And then, list goes on. Obviously, Stewie is a beast. Shout out to Breanna Stewart for ending the New York championship drought last year, technically this past year. Shout out to the New York Liberty. But so there's that. And then on the guys' side, right, you got some awesome names in there, whether it's Ray Allen, whether it's, Rip Hamilton, Emeka Okafor, Kemba Walker. Like I could keep going. It is a really cool thing. And, so shout out to the UConn basketball programs because you guys are a lot of fun to cover and you continue to shine a light on not only such a cool sport, but women's sports specifically, because that is a big deal. And, UConn has always been a shining example of that, but now it's a big deal, especially with so many players being in that light and with the WNBA being where it is. Like UConn was invested and was, a pillar of women's basketball for years and was there in the inception of the WNBA. So shout out to you
paycheck.
This is great.
The paycheck from Morgan and UConn PR is on its way. I know you did.
Listen, man,
I know you did that for free. but that's good, man. I am a big,
It's
as you
cool
know, a
stuff,
big
man.
fan of UConn basketball, men and women. So, quiet as it's kept because obviously I'm Villanova all the way as well. But, my he's not him, or basically my they are my okay, my they are them. Uh, are two two players, two basketball players for two different reasons. Jimmy Butler, just because I think he's becoming way too chaotic. I think that I like Jimmy. I think he's a great player, but I also think that there are times where you push your leverage a little too much and become somewhat close to a Terrell Owens. And I feel like we've seen the outside of Philadelphia where he wasn't a problem because out of respect for Joel Embiid. But I feel like it's getting to a point where I just think it's him and not these teams. We figured out now that it wasn't Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Wiggins. It was him in Minnesota. We figured out that it was him in Chicago. We now figure out that it's him in Miami. Obviously, Pat Riley should have just let him go last summer instead of just re-signing him. I said this. I've texted Danny about it. Danny knows how I feel about having players as rentals because it never works out. Kawhi Leonard, as the example, won a championship and then didn't stay in Toronto. Now, Toronto would say, and Danny has made this argument that it worked out for them, but I don't think it worked out for them in the long term because I feel like they could have had a dynasty if he stayed there. But he went to the Clippers, he got his championships, and it is what it is. This is not about Kawhi. This is more about Jimmy. I feel like Jimmy is ruining his legacy. I feel like Jimmy is just becoming a player that wants that bag one last time. It's funny because a lot of people think James Harden is a problem, and he is, but in both in positive and negative. But I feel like Jimmy Butler is becoming the ultimate problem, right? When you don't want to go to the Warriors, for breaking news for those of you that haven't been following, this just broke. They have a trade to send him to the Warriors, and it has fallen apart because he won't sign an extension to stay in Golden State. And I think that is a problem, Jimmy, because Golden State is like the perfect place for you to just go retire, play with Steph, get your numbers, and but it is what it is. So that's one of my they aren't thems. And my other one, because I let him slide last week and I won't let him slide this week. Draymond Green. Like, look, man, I love you. I think you're great. But I stay away from talking about Jordan Poole, man, because it just makes you look worse. You punched him in his face. And now every time he says something like just like 1%, maybe he's throwing shade at you. Here you are bringing it back. You talk on your podcast last week, Danny. I know you probably saw it, talking about how, I had to calm myself down because he should just let it go. I'm all I know, dude. He doesn't need to let it go. You need to let it go because he hasn't said anything. The only reason we know about this, other than the video from TMZ, is because you keep talking about it. He doesn't talk about it. Like the most we've heard from Jordan Poole is from his parents, who have every right to be pissed at you because you cold cocked their son and embarrassed him in front of everybody. Like, you are the reason the Warriors are not winning more championships. You are the reason Kevin Durant isn't there. You are the reason why the Warriors have no future. And any objective Warriors fan knows this. You ruined that team, dog. You ran KD out. You ran Jordan Poole out. And yes, Steve Kerr, Bob Myers, and the rest of them, Joe Lacob and the rest of them let you run wild. They're just as fault as you. But the fact that they let an ego like yours grow to the point where you thought it was okay to punch your teammate, I don't care what he said to you. I don't care if he called you a B. I don't care if he called you a hoe. I don't really care what he called you, dog. There's no reason for you to cold cock somebody and then just be like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know about Danny, but I might forgive you, but I'm not talking to nobody who cold cocks me in the face. Like, knocks me out. Danny might be a little bit more professional than me, but ain't no way I'm being friends. And Carmelo said this too. Like, he said it a little bit less, he said it a little bit more vulgar than I'm about to say. I'm gonna say it a lot cleaner. But he said he's not gonna be friends, and he's from Baltimore, so obviously, Northeast. We all somewhat think alike when it comes to this. He said the same thing. Like, he's not gonna be friends with you. Like, stop talking about this, dog. I want to forget about this. Like, the only reason Danny, I won't speak for Danny. The only reason I want to talk about this is when Jordan Poole finally decides to address it in some way. He has not addressed it. He's left it alone. like I've said, the most we've heard from Jordan Poole has been from his parents and not from him. And he might be indirectly speaking through his parents. We don't know. But like, maybe I need to bring a Golden State Warriors reporter in here to talk about this. But I just feel like, Draymond, you need to stop, because every time you talk about this, it makes you look worse. So that's why they are them, Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, for two different reasons. Boom. Danny, I know you got to go. So thank you so much for coming. 2 hours. We went a little crazy on the basketball talk, as we often do as two basketball heads. A little longer than I thought. I thought I'd get you out of here by 9:30, but it's 10:40. But thank you for coming through, man. I'm glad we could link up. I know that you and I are both passionate about our teams and our cities. Try to keep this as objective as possible. So, the Knicks are really good right now. I'm going to leave with something positive about a New York team. The Knicks are really good right now. Whether I think they're going to make the playoffs or whatever, they're obviously going to make the playoffs. Whether I think they're going to go deep in the playoffs, notwithstanding. And so, yeah, I love having you here, man. I love the back and forth. We always get into something. And so, yeah, one day we'll want to have you on here with Morgan and a couple of other people. But, you're great. One of my closest friends in Syracuse. So, as always, love you like a brother, dog. Thank you so much for coming through. Glad you're back on the East Coast. Need to have a reunion soon in person, but this'll do for now. Thank you so much, man. I know you talked about some of your other stories. Anything you want to leave the people with before we get on out of here?
Yeah, man. So just to reiterate, thank you again for having me on. Too few and far between are like real conversations and opportunities to hang out and everything, just because of life getting in the way and stuff. And I think it was fun. There's a lot of great topics to talk about today, and obviously there's just so much, and they're dense, right? Like I think that's the cool thing about this medium, is that you can have nuanced conversations about whatever is going on. So, but yeah, man, seriously, our time at Cuse was special, and I think that's something that we need to hold on to and remember, and keep in our thoughts from that standpoint. So, but seriously, man, I appreciate the opportunity to come on. Let me know what's up. Hopefully, we can link up again sometime down the line. Figure out how we want to make that happen. But in the meantime, I'm sorry, I will not be rooting for the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I'll tell you that. But seriously,
as I would never think you would, but
but in all seriousness, it's been fun, man. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, and yeah, man. Until next time.
All right, man. Enjoy. All right, y'all. Have a good one. We'll see you in a few days. Well, hopefully with Morgan. So talk to y'all soon. Have a good one. Thank you for watching, whether it's now or later. Peace.